This program deals with devil worship and satanic beliefs. It contains explicit scenes and descriptions of violent crimes and rituals.
Americans are asking, who attacked our country?
You have declared a subliminal jihad against the United States. Can you tell us why?
Everything pertaining to what's happening has never come to the surface. The world will never know the true facts of what occurred, my motives.
And night fell on a different world.
And Iblis is thinking, I should be getting this position, not Adam, and this guy is created from dirt.
And how does the army feel about you being head of the temple of Set?
And the conspiracy theorists can say what they will, but
I want you to give me power over Adam, and I want you to give me soldiers and minions and all of these things.
The people that had so much to gain and had such an ulterior motive for putting me in a position I'm in will never let the true facts come above board to the world.
And I want you to be able to give me the ability to whisper into the hearts of mankind.
And who was the grotto leader? Don't remember his name. You don't remember the name of a person who involved you in murder?
Now these people are in very high positions, Jack.
Yes.
Welcome back to Subliminal Jihad, episode 35. I am your co-host, Dimitri.
I'm Khalid.
And today, as we're recording this, is there still a nor'easter pummeling the East Coast, Khalid?
Well, it was snowy, but now it's not really pummeling. But it is a very appropriate episode because I guess it's not this night, but tomorrow night is the winter solstice. Right, the darkest night of the year.
By definition, the darkest
night of the winter. Yeah.
The darkest winter night there is.
Yes.
And
it's also just like, on a very even spookier note, it's going to be the date of a grand conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn. Very rare and very portentous astronomical event.
Yes, I noticed the other day.
Solstice, so very yeah.
It's actually happening on the winter solstice?
Yes.
Wow.
Which is, very very portentous, you would think.
Aquino is probably kicking himself on the astral plane or in hell, wherever he is, that he wasn't, around to do a working for that.
Right.
Raise his SS dagger to the sky and talk to Set. But it's definitely
there will be a lot of witchery happening. It was.
And I think as we're going to talk about today, I think maybe there's been a lot of witchery happening leading into this very dark winter.
Yes.
Dark winter.
Yeah.
Dark winter. To paraphrase
winter.
To paraphrase our president-elect, Joseph Robinette Biden, we are now, on the cusp of officially, at least, entering into the season, which kind of very notably, I think it jumped out to a lot of people. He is described as the dark winter to come.
Yeah, I feel like we've been in a dark winter. It's cold. It's really dark. I've definitely felt the darkness this winter more than in prior winters, like how early it becomes dark. It's just like I
think I've noticed that with
dark.
just about everybody, that it's sort of hit you on a more physiological and psychological
level.
level.
I wonder why that is. I feel like I have seasonal affective disorder this year, not really having had it in the past. I don't get why. Maybe it's because we're all so alone,
I think so, and still inside. I tend to forget. I've been getting sun throughout this pandemic. Certainly, being in California, you can usually walk around.
Right. It's probably warm there. It's not here.
It's not bad. It gets a little bit nippy at night, but certainly nothing to whine about on the podcast. It's 48 degrees. Wah.
Okay. Right.
I've experienced worse, but you do notice that, especially if you're not a natural morning person, which I would say I am not, that the amount of available daylight that you get exposed to, even in a place like Southern California, really drops off when they do daylight savings time. So I don't know. I'm popping some vitamin D. Maybe we'll come back around that in today's episode. I think probably
good,
everybody should be popping some.
Sun. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And it's also, potentially might have some kind of prophylactic effects against.
Earlier this year, I was prescribed like a clinical dose of vitamin D because my vitamin D was so low. But I haven't gotten COVID, so that morbidity was not, I'm not evidence of that, but. It's definitely something that can happen, especially if you live in New England and it's cloudy all the time.
And having lived in northern latitudes before, I'm not a total taffy-ass California beach kid. I've lived in some chilly climes, some dark climes, and it's funny, I never thought about it back then to be like, oh, I should probably take like some vitamins because it's literally depressing to live at this latitude. But now it kind of seems like, why not? Though somebody did point out in the grotto, just, this is our health tips of the week. Probably want to take some magnesium along with that vitamin D3 because it helps the absorption in the body. So maybe if you don't get enough magnesium, your body might not be absorbing as much of the D3 that it could.
We need to get our. We need to have our own like brain force type product for like jihad. We need like
get some iodine. Yeah.
Yeah, we need like the shield of jihad or something. Like yeah, it's like some kind of patented cocktail of vitamin D and like magnesium.
Subliminal jihad, artemisinin. North Vietnamese National Liberation Front approved. That's actually true. Developed by communists for communists, to eradicate malaria and maybe stop COVID if Bill Gates doesn't monopolize it first. So maybe we can launch a line like that.
A nootropic thing too, kind of like super male vitality, brain force type situation. Something.
Sure.
Yeah.
We'll work on it.
Yeah,
anything. I mean, or y'all could just go run and get the vaccine. I have a feeling that the listenership on this podcast is at least a wee bit ambivalent about being first in line.
Ambivalent, I would say. And I think that, I don't know, I feel like most people are extremely ambivalent about the vaccine, which is, I don't really know anyone who's super eager to take it. And on one hand, I think that some of the stuff around the vaccine is a little bit facile, and I almost feel like there is a certain almost obnoxious contrarian impulse in some of the vaccine skepticism, but on the other hand, I do fully understand it, and I've been expressing it to an extent since the beginning, especially with the nature of some of the vaccines being mRNA, and just the vaccine isn't really, it seems like we already have come to kind of accept the fact that although maybe it created sort of a break in the clouds for some people, and people are like, oh, this is going to be the antidote, and once there's a vaccine, then this will all be over. Now people are starting to realize oh wait, the vaccine isn't going to make this end. And which probably makes people even more reluctant to get it, which will even further mitigate any benefit that the vaccine might have had.
That's an interesting feedback loop of just getting really just bummed out by the dark winter vibes that
I think that everyone the psychic costs of all this are really coming to the fore. People are expressing it in many different ways, and it's not something that again, as I've said on the podcast before, I do not envy the people whose job it is to, leaving aside possible sus vampires who are plotting a pandemic to subjugate everyone and enforce transhumanism. Sure. I wouldn't envy being your average bureaucrat who has to come up with some kind of response to the situation.
No.
Because it's a nightmare for everyone living it, and
Yeah, I
especially
listened to a Zoom kind of a town hall Q&A thing with, I guess it was LA County health experts earlier this week, and they just kind of, I did not envy their position, nor did I come away particularly filled with confidence about kind of the impact, the positive impact this vaccine is going to have. I mean, every question was something along the lines of, if I get this vaccine, can I still like sort of catch the virus? Like, even if I don't suffer from it, like, can I still be infected with it and pass it on to people that I live with or people that I interact with? And they basically didn't have like a good answer for it. They were like, we don't think so, but like nobody was willing to kind of like go out, because I think that we literally don't know if it does that. And so if it's a kind of thing where it just protects you from getting sick from COVID, but you can still kind of like catch it and spread it around to people, then it becomes a thing where, well, then I guess everybody really does have to get the vaccine, because then you could still spread it and kill people who aren't vaccinated, hypothetically. And that sounds like a much bigger lift than something that just like shields you from even being able to kind of get it at all. So like it has nowhere to spread to. It seems like it can still float around for quite a while. I mean, if everyone's vaccinated, I don't know, like presumably it will die out sooner or later. But I just noticed there was, there's so much kind of perception management, even going down to these like county health official levels, from up to the governors, and then obviously the White House, and then these saintly high priests of science in their glittering white acolyte robes on television every day, telling you with this kind of a priestly confidence, what the deal is. And it's not, there's a lot of disjointed stuff, and I think there's a lot of like benign kind of, I don't know if I would always call it gaslighting, but sometimes it feels that way. Like there was one example where a guy asked, like there were several iterations, like I said, of this question of like, can I still get it and spread it to people even if I'm not sick? But one guy asked, like, if I get the vaccine, can I still catch, if I get the vaccine, will I be able to spread it, get the vaccine or get the virus and spread it to people in my household? And they kind of almost like willfully like misunderstood his question, and were like, no, sir. No. Getting the vaccine does not give you COVID-19. So don't worry. You won't infect anybody by getting the vaccine. And it's like, yo, that wasn't his fucking question. Like his question was like, can you still get it elsewhere if you have the vaccine, even if you don't get affected? Like, I don't know. It just seems like there's a real difficulty in trying to like spell any of this out with clarity. And I think that just leads to just the really kind of dispiriting vibes of this, like, now that we're like 10 months into the dark year, really, and this is, it is feeling kind of darker than ever, because there's also all of these social, economic, and political consequences and huge changes happening that kind of feel more out of the hands of any kind of like democratic accountability. So, as limited as that was, before 2020, that it's really these kind of high-level politicians and bureaucrats, and then people like, the head of the WEF, like Klaus Schwab, who just came out of fucking nowhere to be like, here's the business plan for how we're going to completely remake the global economy. Trust me, it'll be awesome. And we're going to have a great reset. And, all these, and most small businesses are going to die. And Amazon and Google and like 10 companies are going to basically like be able to sort of take over huge swaths of the economy in this kind of what's starting to almost feel a little bit like a managed collapse of certain, or a bust out of certain parts of the economy. And to what extent that was planned in advance of COVID-19 of 2020, or to what extent this is like an on-the-fly capitalizing on this crisis to do the things they wanted to do anyways. it's a very interesting question. And I think it harks back a little bit to, I mean, in that line, it harks back a little bit to 9/11, where it's like, if this like total black swan event happens that is like the absolute best thing that could ever happen to the ghouls that just got into the White House and have all these kind of wacky plans waiting on the shelf to be implemented, from the Patriot Act to invading Iraq and everything, you start to wonder, like, wow, are these just the luckiest villains in the world that it just so happened to happen, you know, right on their watch? And it almost feels, I think that fuels that sense, that vague sense, is fueling a lot of social anxiety as well. That it seems a little bit like certain people in powerful positions were like too prepared for certain aspects of this crisis, and then seemingly completely bumbling and incompetent in other aspects of this crisis. Like the one, in more cases, the ones you would actually care about them, you know, handling, like having enough hospital capacity or coming up with sensible measures
in what aspect would you say that they were prepared?
Well, okay, the prepared thing is like the idea of like Klaus Schwab coming out with like a dedicated issue, and I forget, it was Time or Newsweek, that was like all dedicated to the Great Reset. So that's the part that I feel like is kind of prepared.
Like there were certain things, that have benefited from like using this as kind of a platform from which to kind of advance things that were in a way prepared in advance. I think that
like remote work, remote learning, things like that.
Yeah, I think that all
remote
that
healthcare.
Yeah, I think all that stuff has been, and like, this is kind of where the whole issue of Dark Winter, which is not only Joe Biden's catchphrase, but like an extremely influential and popular bioterrorism drill that was performed in 2001. Just, it was sort of the fuss around it was really in the aftermath of 9/11. That sort of phrase creates the link between these two things that some people often perceive. And I think that there is kind of a in like with that situation, I think that there are aspects of it in which like those types of things have allowed people to be prepared, but also ways in which like even those exercises that they've done have only been sort of heated in certain ways. But I think that, on many levels, it's something that was anticipated. I mean, even like they understood that it would be not a matter of if, but a matter of when. I mean, that was all couched in Dark Winter. The exercise was all couched in bioterrorism, but at the same time, like even in other exercises that have been done, and like, just in the general conversation, everyone knew that eventually like something like this would happen. It was like all those people have been talking about it as something that was a long-standing expectation. And I think that what you say about doctors and like medical professionals and the medical profession in general is really interesting. And I think that as this has happened, we've had to really confront the sort of, you call them like priests in their acolyte robes. And I think that we've really had to confront the cultural complex that we have around like the authority of medical professionals or medical doctors. They're in a way like the most revered, sainted people in American culture. There was like extreme, even in the early days of COVID, there was sort of this extreme outpouring of reverence and support for healthcare workers, which, obviously they have not had it easy, and they've done like a lot of work to try to keep people safe and well, so that's all good. But at the same time, kind of not very, not directly related to that per se, there definitely is a kind of unconfronted thing in American and perhaps like other cultures where doctors and healthcare providers are seen to be these kind of unimpeachable experts and the sort of guardians of this privileged knowledge that is the ultimate arbiter of what's correct and like how to perceive the world. And I remember like being in one seminar and this other student who, to be fair, was Arab. She was saying something about Egyptian politics, and she was kind of critiquing Saba Mahmood, R.I.P., and who had, she had kind of made Saba Mahmood, that is, her work is known for its sort of critique of sort of feminist approaches to the ethnography of Muslim women, and how sometimes these hermeneutics don't really line up properly with how Islamic piety is experienced by women. It's typical kind of like do Muslim women need saving type of thing. But she this other student was saying something like when you think about the way that this Islamic piety plays out, things like heaven and hell, they're inherently more coercive, and I got triggered, and I was like, disagree, I don't think that God is more coercive than the state is. And she was like, well, think about your sheikh in a mosque versus your doctor in a hospital, like one is like much more coercive. And I was like, what? Like, wow. The sheikh in a mosque, like in, certain countries, like he may very well be like a representative of state power, but a doctor like absolutely is, like, in the United States as well as in Egypt and other places.
Not to mention the potential for abuse of that power. Like, what if your doctor is like, cutting you like an OxyContin prescription, getting you hooked on opiates or something.
There's many ways in which doctors, right? It's almost absurd to consider like the many ways in which like a doctor's authority can be coercive. But I just think that like way of thinking,
I think that is one of the, if we're going to follow the kind of logic of like June 2020, where like, racism is the real pandemic, well then I think blind faith in science and facts is also up there as one of the real psychological pandemics of our era.
It's very similar especially around like medicine, like, and health and that area of science, like, because and there really is a parallel with the cop thing, because if you look at American popular culture, the two biggest like heroes, like in terms of what you see in the media, are cops and doctors. Like, absolutely across the board. And like now people have started to be like, oh wait, like cops, like. But the doctor stuff is like almost increased in response, like proportionally in response, in the same way that people have started to finally feel a little bit of skepticism around the police. The reverence towards doctors has
it's a very interesting political binary, a kind of yin and yang, or a kind of dialectic that like mostly, I say primarily, network TV does with their like endless array of cop and doctor shows. Is like cops are kind of lean more red state, and doctors are more like therapeutic, liberal. It's like one uses state sanctioned violence to kill bad people, or like catch bad people and like put them away, catch sickos and put them away, and then the other one is basically there to use their professional training in a state sanctioned way to like save lives and heal people,
to heal the sickos instead of
like if you want to see a real
versus solve the
like
sickos.
heal the sickos or like destroy the sickos. Like either way, they're dealing with the society of sickos.
Deal with the sickos.
It makes me think of like, and I think it's gotten more kind of messianic. My favorite, maybe both of our favorite of the kind of awful, they're mostly unwatchable, the doctor shows on network TV, but I think New Amsterdam is kind of like a great example. If anyone wants to be like sickened by pro-doctor like agitprop, it sets him up as like basically like Jesus Christ. Like
well, it's kind of like it's very, very much the West Wing of doctor shows. The same sort of like just like over like grandiose, like just gushing, like bizarre, like I don't know, that West Wing vibe. But in a hospital context,
like economic reality like does not intrude at all upon this world, where it's like the only currency circulating in this hospital is like caring enough. And like, if you just care more and like, you know, pour your heart out to like, you know, make this hospital the best hospital ever, then magically things will like, if you inspire all the other doctors to like feel, you know, it's very bizarre. It's like he comes in with his almost like corporate consultant attitude of like wanting to like psy up all the other doctors to like look at him as like this cult leader who is, you know, they can like rally behind and feel like they're saving the world in a very, give them like a nice, clean, sentimental Sorkin narrative to make them feel like they're doing God's work. But, you know, or really doing science's work.
He also swaggers in and like fires a bunch of the doctors who put profits before patients. You know?
No, really, the show first like kind of positions itself as like, we don't need Medicare for all or anything like that. We just need more. I believe his name is Dr. Goodwin.
Dr. Max Goodwin.
Maximum Goodwin.
Maximum Goodwin.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that season 3 is debuting this spring, so it's doing well. You know, I feel like those shows are almost lost leaders, like ideological lost leaders. Like, I don't even know anymore. I assume somebody watches all these fucking like Dick Wolf cop shows still. I haven't met anybody who does, but they still are out there. But anyways, to get I think this is a central problem, like the priestification of doctors and medical professionals. Like all the cable news networks kind of have one, like in like a kind of bizarre twist. You know, they have like Dr. Sanjay Gupta on CNN, who's like kind of their main guy, but then MSNBC got like a younger, like more dashing, like Dr. Gupta of their own, who is like even has like 5 degrees from like Oxford, Princeton, Yale, like etc. And I notice he is always giving a kind of like TikTok doctor performance, like lecturing you on like what the facts are. And Brian Williams like regularly gushes about how many degrees this guy has. Oh, and also he's such an amazing, perfect, you know, Ubermensch that he, you know, spends his time on the weekends moonlighting in the Air Force reserves.
Wow. That's incredibly brave.
What a fucking hero. I love it. So, yeah, this guy's like literally in the military in his spare time. And, so, but okay, so like we wrapped up in all this, I guess maybe the main focus today, or like what our kind of line in is this exercise, Dark Winter. And I think we'll talk about maybe a couple exercises. This is like the first and most notable that happened in June 2001. There was some after, leading all the way up to the very interesting Event 201 from October 2019, which was run by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Johns Hopkins University, and the World Economic Forum, and mapped out a global coronavirus pandemic, basically, just in October, like a month before the Wuhan outbreak.
I went to the website for Event 21 or Event 201, and I'm going to confuse with Agenda 21 and other, you know.
That is interesting. I hadn't thought of that.
Plan. But well, I guess it's the same sum if you kind of, but anyway.
Numerologically.
So yes, but I went to the hash. They still have the hashtag like in the menu bar of the website, but if you go to the hashtag Event 201 now, it's like all like conspiracy theories about pandemic. It's all like pandemic stuff now. Which is, so I guess I haven't been back to that website in a while to do maintenance, because I think someone
they're just leaving it up there. I guess to pull it down would be more conspicuous than to just leave it there. Like what? This is totally innocent. You know, we were just war gaming the exact thing that was going to happen. I think it even was like a coronavirus emerges out of China and then like spreads to Europe and the United States and all this shit. But anyway,
to play actual devil's advocate, I do think that like they did, like it was a thing that like people knew that something like this was going to happen like for a while. Like I do think that in the same way that like it's it's not like 9/11 where people are like, how could we ever have possibly seen this coming?
A failure of imagination was the term.
Exactly. Like no, I don't think that anybody has said that. Yeah, exactly. I mean, well, many people imagined it, like, including, like, you know, Vince Gilligan or whatever, or whoever did the Lone Gunman pilot. But,
Tom Clancy imagined it.
Exactly.
The memo
people
from
were
June
imagining
2001.
It nonstop. Yeah.
Fucking imagined it.
Yeah, the World Trade Center bomber imagined it. But anyway, yeah, I guess he didn't imagine the commercial airliner component, but still, like, So, well, but I don't think that even in the official narrative, people say that this, like, you know, no one could have seen this coming. In fact, it's the opposite, where like we should have known.
Yes. Well, that's a paradox that I think we'll come back to kind of again and again. Is like, if you guys were preparing for this so much, like, why does this feel like such a clusterfuck?
Yeah.
If y'all were wargaming this over the years so extensively. Yeah.
Well, I think that there's a difference between what actually was adopted by, like, governments and what these groups like the WHO or the WHO, we were debating before recording what to properly call them. But
Wikipedia says you can call it WHO if you want.
Yeah, I was calling it a WHO. Well, that's what it spells. You know, usually with these acronyms, if they spell something. But anyway, yeah, so like I think that there is a disconnect between what, like, some of these, you know, health lobbyists or like the World Health Organization will say, like, you know, we need to do, and what governments actually end up adopting. I don't know. I mean, I do remember that there was some like talk about like how like Obama had a whole plan and Trump threw it in the garbage or whatever. You know, like
Susan Rice was running around saying that when she was kind of
fake,
auditioning for VP.
I did hear that. You know.
I mean, I think they had something. They had something to do with the Ebola, you know, outbreak in 2014. That's the other thing that is kind of interesting, is that there were like these. If you want to be ultra paranoid, you could almost see them as like trial runs of like these different viruses that I personally like never took seriously for like 2 seconds back, you know, like the swine flu, H1N1, like the avian
those
flu,
were like jokes
those
almost, like we would be joking about it, you know, like people would be joking about it, you know, not like us, like not like it was our personal like favorite inside joke to mock the swine flu, but you know, it was like it was not this. I actually found, you know, I stumbled upon like a, you know, some like really hardcore like Mark of the Beast type, you know, don't get a vaccine, like it is, you know, transhumanism, you know, like article, and in there was a bibliography, I guess, for the article, or like, you know, further research. And in that article, I came across this website, evidencenotfear.com. And they have a mirror of a Forbes article. You know, I actually really have no way of verifying their claim, although I guess they do have a capture of it, from archive.org. So yeah, this seems to be a real thing, and I mean I think it's real. But so it's an article by Michael Fumento. So, you know, this. Obviously, like, you know, it reads differently now, but, you know, you talked about why the event 2201 people didn't scrub their website, but actually, apparently, Forbes did do this in October 2020. They got rid of this article. You know, it was a 10-year-old article, but I'm pretty sure, you know, there's a reason why. Like, I'm sure they still host their other 10-year-old articles, but, yeah, this guy, you know, and there's obviously a certain slant to this, but, you know, take it as you will, because I think there's some chilling things in here. This guy, Michael Fumento, wrote, he says, the World Health Organization has suddenly gone from crying, the sky is falling like a cackling chicken little, to squealing like a stuck pig. The reason? Charges that the agency deliberately fomented swine flu hysteria. The world is going through a real pandemic. The description of it as fake is wrong and irresponsible, the agency claims on its website. WHO spokesman declined to specify who or what gave this description, but the primary accuser is hard to ignore. The Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, PACE, a human rights watchdog, is publicly investigating the WHO's motives in declaring a pandemic. Indeed, the chairman of its influential health committee, epidemiologist Wolfgang Wodarg, has declared that the, quote, false pandemic is one of the greatest medicine scandals of the century. Even within the agency, the director of the WHO Collaborating Center for Epidemiology in Münster, Germany, Dr. Ulrich Hiel, has essentially labeled the pandemic a hoax. We are witnessing a gigantic misallocation of resources, 18 billion so far, in terms of public health, he said. They're right. This wasn't merely overcautiousness or simple misjudgment. The pandemic declaration and all the klaxon ringing, the klaxon ringing since reflects sheer dishonesty motivated not by medical concerns but political ones. Unquestionably, swine flu has proved to be vastly milder than ordinary seasonal flu. It kills a third to a tenth the rate, according to U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention estimates. Data from other countries like France and Japan indicate it's far tamer than that. Indeed, judging by what we've seen in New Zealand and Australia, where the epidemics have ended, and by what we're seeing elsewhere in the world, we'll have considerably fewer flu deaths this season than normal. That's because swine flu muscles aside seasonal flu, acting as a sort of inoculation against the far deadlier strain. Did the WHO have any indicators of this mildness when it declared the pandemic in June? Absolutely. As I wrote at the time, we were then fully 11 weeks, this is also 404 not found, we were then fully 11 weeks into the outbreak, and swine flu had only killed 144 people worldwide, the same number who die of seasonal flu worldwide for every few hours. An estimated 250,000 to 500,000 per year by the WHO's own numbers. The mildest pandemics of the 20th century killed at least 1 million people. But how could the organization declare a pandemic when its own official definition required simultaneous epidemics worldwide with enormous numbers of deaths and illnesses? Severity, that is, the number of deaths, is crucial because every year flu causes, quote, a global spread of disease. Easy. In May, in what it admitted was a direct response to the outbreak of swine flu in the month before, WHO promulgated a new definition matched to swine flu that simply eliminated severity as a factor. You could now have a pandemic with 0 deaths. Under fire, the organization is boldly lying about the change, to which anybody with an internet connection can attest. In a mid-January virtual conference, WHO swine flu chief Keiji Fukada stated, "Did WHO change its definition of pandemic? The answer is no. WHO did not change its definition." Today it would be no. WHO did not change their definition.
No,
the headline of an article. Yeah. 2 weeks later, at a PACE conference, he insisted having severe deaths has never been part of the WHO definition. They did it, but why? In part, it was CYA for the WHO. The agency was losing credibility over the refusal of avian flu H5N1 to go pandemic and kill as many as 150 million people worldwide, as its flu czar had predicted in 2005. Around the world, nations heeded the warnings and spent vast sums developing vaccines and making other preparations. So when swine flu conveniently trotted in, the WHO essentially crossed out avian, inserted swine, and WHO Director General Margaret Chan arrogantly boasted, "The world can now reap the benefits of investments over the last 5 years in pandemic preparedness." But there's more than bureaucratic self-interest at work here. Bizarrely enough, the WHO has also exploited its phony pandemic to push a hard-left political agenda. All right. This is Forbes. Okay. All right. So,
yeah.
In a September speech, WHO Director General Chan said, "Ministers of health should take advantage of the devastating impact swine flu will have on poorer nations to get out the message that changes in the functioning of the global economy are needed to distribute wealth on the basis of values like community, solidarity, equity, and social justice." She further declared it should be used as a weapon against international policies and systems that govern financial markets, economies, commerce, trade, and foreign affairs. Chan's dream now lies in tatters. All the WHO has done, says Pace's Vodart, is to, I think he spelled his name differently, but anyway, as to destroy much of the credibility that they should have, which is invaluable to us if there's a future scare that might turn out to be a killer on a large scale. So, what I think, you can definitely take issue with certain aspects of that. However, I do think that the ending note rings pretty true. That the credibility was in a way undermines, and that has had dire consequences in COVID times. Yes.
I was just trying to think back to, was it the avian flu, the H5N1, where governments ordered a ton of vaccines from, I forget it was, Pfizer or one of the big, pharmaceutical companies, and then it just petered out, it was a joke, and they ended up not needing it. But then of course, the manufacturers of the vaccine basically made hundreds of millions of dollars in profit, or maybe even billions in profit off of that from the public funds of various governments. And I do remember kind of trying to kind of make it a thing. I remember the certain people in the media kind of trying to hype it up briefly as this big scary thing, and it just sort of it didn't pan out. And so, you know, I think who said that quote about how they want to use it as a weapon to undermine the global financial system?
I mean, was
he paraphrasing?
I think that he was paraphrasing. He said, he put in the whole thing about the weapon. I think that was, he wrote it should be used as a weapon against international, he wrote the word weapon, and that it should be used as a weapon against international policies and systems that govern financial markets, economies, commerce, trade, and foreign affairs. That paragraph about how, or those two paragraphs about how it's a far left political agenda because the WHO director said a bunch of platitudes about how, obviously poorer nations suffer worse in pandemics, and so therefore we should change the global economy, which of course is never really borne out, but just something that people repeat because it's self-evidently true. It would be good if poor countries weren't destitute, and that they were able to respond to these health crises in a way that didn't have massive human costs. But I do think that the earlier idea, which is kind of what you're gesturing to, that there were huge investments in preparedness for the avian flu that didn't really amount to too much. And then, she said, Margaret Chan said that the world can now reap the benefits of investments over the last 5 years in pandemic preparedness because there's now, But of course, I guess that, we didn't really reap that when there was a real, serious pandemic, because if all those preparations were made, we didn't really see, So I don't know what happened in between the swine flu and now, where, I guess the preparedness went away. You'd think there would be still some institutions in place, but I guess there weren't.
You would think so. Yeah. Well, I guess maybe, because they were practicing for something like that. Do we want to dive into Dark Winter proper and what it was, who was involved in it, and what they allegedly learned from it?
Yeah, this is interesting because a lot of people have pointed out the, Joe Biden repeating Dark Winter. I feel like that's become, a curiosity for many people that he continually repeats this phrase that, I guess some people find spooky. And, I mean, it's a cliche, but also no one wants to think about having a dark winter. It's kind of oddly doomer for Joe Biden to be direly intoning about how we're in for a dark winter. I almost think that Joe Biden may have gotten that idea from this. I almost feel like maybe the phrase dark winter came into his brain because he has an association with this, which obviously,
or he had been briefed on it. He had been briefed on it at some point on his pandemic task force or something. I mean, this is even during the election, but still, I think that sounds about right, because this is very influential within government and policy circles. This 2001
it was a huge thing. Yeah, exactly. There was a lot of talk about it, and I think he was in Congress at the time, wasn't he? Or was he in the Senate?
Yeah, he was a senator.
Yeah,
he was. And probably a lot of his friends, I would say, because there were a lot of maybe current and ex-senators or a couple of them that were the participants, the players in the exercise. And maybe I should just read, because it is kind of a rogues gallery of interesting individuals.
Yeah.
So these were... The parts were played of kind of the major government officials, and then and let's see, and the kind of the governor of Oklahoma, which is the locus of this smallpox attack. We'll get into the narrative of it in a second, but the president was played by former senator from Georgia, Sam Nunn. Mm-hmm. The National Security Advisor, this is interesting, was played by David Gergen, who I'm sure some people know is a proud member of Bohemian Grove and was famously confronted by Alex Jones years ago and asked about, so I was there burning the owl. Why do you burn a cremation of care? And then he said something well, if you were there and you're speaking about it, then I disrespect you for that, sir. I disrespect you. And he's like, do you sacrifice children? And he's like, you are a very very bad man, and you had no business. You took an oath to not say what was going to go down in there. You know, like, it was very kind of classic, weird. You can still find it on YouTube. But David Gergen has been like, you know, he's been an advisor to like multiple. He was an advisor to Nixon, Ford, Reagan, and Bill Clinton. I'm surprised he must have been an advisor to H.W. Bush at some point. But he's one of these like fixtures, very plugged in guy. So he was the National Security Advisor. Director of Central Intelligence was James Woolsey Jr., R. James Woolsey Jr., who was the head of the CIA under Clinton from 93 to 95. And was actually involved in treaty negotiations with the Soviet Union for 5 years in the 1980s. And it's a guy that pops up a lot on like cable news nowadays, and as a kind of woke CIA veteran kind of person, you know, a little more. He is a Democrat, and cool. Went to Stanford, Oxford, became a Rhodes Scholar, so early CIA, and then Yale Law School, and you know, he's a pretty plugged in guy as well. So he was playing the CIA director, which he had done in real life. Then Secretary of Defense was John P. White, who served in the Clinton administration. Chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff was John Tleli. This one jumped out at me. Secretary of State Frank Wisner, who is one of those names that pops up. He's actually, this would be the son of Frank Wisner, because Frank Wisner, who often was an OSS guy, headed the Office of Policy Coordination in the late 40s, and then headed the Directorate of Plans under Allen Dulles. A lot of weird kind of connections to like Bay of Pigs and shit like that. He suffered a mental breakdown in 1958 and retired from the agency in 1962 and committed suicide in 65. So his son, I believe, went on to be a he also organized CIA activities in British Guiana, where Jonestown would eventually end up, and he was electroshocked, might have been MK'd, who knows. And yeah, so Frank G. Wisner is his son, who is, he's an advisor at Square Patton Boggs, and is a career Foreign Service officer in the State Department, so read between the lines, if you will. With that, he served on the board of, at a subsidiary of Enron and AIG, so he's plugged in. So we're getting into like Contra territory. And then just, let's see, on top of that, the governor of Oklahoma in this exercise was played by Frank Keating of the Keating 5 scandal, I believe. That was Charles Keating. They must be related. There's no way they're not related. Anyways, and
Keating
last but not
is a common name. I don't know, but yeah.
I guess it is. But he was actually the former governor of Hawaii, or no, not Hawaii, fucking Oklahoma. And last but not least, an interesting one is like somebody who played the reporter for the New York Times was none other than Judith Miller, who eventually got sent to prison for. And who lied about published a bunch of fake WMD articles in the New York Times that got us into the war in Iraq. So, this is heavy hitters.
That's very appropriate. Yeah, because this whole thing was very much like the whole thing starts with, and this is like, this is interesting, because the whole framework and this was like a huge splash. It made a huge splash. Everyone was like, oh my god, like, we need to really be aware of this. But the way in which they were aware of it was kind of filtered through this 9/11 lens of bioterrorism. Because the whole thing begins with like this geopolitical briefing where they talk about, there's angry rhetoric between Taiwan and the People's Republic of China. It's reached an all-time high. Last month, Russian authorities, with support from the FBI, arrested Yusuf Abdulaziz, known operative in Al-Qaeda, and a close personal friend and suspected senior lieutenant of Osama bin Laden. Yusuf was caught in a sting operation that had been developing during the last year. He was attempting to acquire 50 kilograms of plutonium and was also attempting to arrange the purchase of several biological pathogens that had been weaponized by the Soviet Union. And this is, the most scary, where talking about Iraq, the Al Dara vaccine plant near Baghdad closed by UN inspectors after the Gulf War renewed full-scale production in 2001. The essential justification for this was the preparation of vaccines against foot and mouth disease. There are also reports that several top scientists from the former Soviet bioweapons program began working in Iraq and Iran 1 year ago.
No.
Dun dun dun. So a lot of this, like the focus on this is like who attacked our country. It was spoiler alert, it was Iraq. So like all the like a lot of the sort of stuff that happens in the course of the exercise, like civil unrest, vaccine shortages, it's all in the framework of this sort of war on terror narrative. And yeah, so it's interesting, yeah, in light of, maybe how, it's interesting how at one time this whole, like, kind of pandemic or health crisis, stuff or predictions or anxieties were kind of channeled through terrorism, but then maybe when there's been some fatigue around the idea of terrorism to the point that the whole, like, it's interesting because you'd think they're almost, I guess Trump kind of floated some of it, but the official state apparatus, like the media apparatus, like didn't, they were all very dismissive of the idea that this had been, manufactured in a lab or something like that.
This was a China virus, yeah.
Yeah. Even though, like, there's nothing really to establish definitively that that wasn't the case. You'd think under other circumstances that idea would at least be entertained. But it oddly wasn't. There was almost an emphasis on the idea that there was no one to blame in that way. And I wonder if there was kind of a reappraisal of how, these things should be framed, and that if the terrorism aspect maybe kind of weighs things down. Because I think terrorism, as we talked about before, is something that, it has no real meaning. It's entirely, like, it's just something that is, it entirely is, like, its definition is just in its, like, application.
It's hard to separate from, like, the relationship between, like, the sort of the target of the terrorism and the terrorists themselves. Like, one person's freedom fighter is another person's terrorist. It's an extremely malleable term and a charged one, because, like, that usually in most cases spreading deliberate terror among a civilian population is seen as a bad thing. As a not good thing. So anybody who's a terrorist is ipso facto bad and a threat.
Yes.
But I wonder that about kind of the exhaustion of terrorism as a motivating narrative for, like, the U.S. empire coming out to the end of the 2010s, where it did have quite a second hurrah to some extent, but I don't know. It's hard to say, to what extent it was as successful as, like, the 9/11 terror spectacle that got all these wars going. I mean, you had, like, the rise of ISIS, and which was sort of laundered back into renewed calls to intervene militarily in Syria, which did happen to some extent. We did, move in. We did start sending, like, special forces operators and a lot of drones and stuff into eastern Syria, but we still weren't able to get, like, a Saddam Hussein result out of Syria that I think we wanted, of toppling the Ba'athist government and blah, blah, blah. And it seems like, these, like, these weird lone wolf terror attacks that happened in Europe and the United States and in other places, well, I still do see reports that the sort of the terror ops tempo is quite high in Africa and a lot of countries where Al Schwab, another nebulous org, is just like
Trump
doing
the Dove, like escalated the drone war in Somalia, like, twofold at least, like, by
And yet he announced that he's like pulling 2,700 troops out of Somalia like right before he leaves office, which like I'm gonna resist the urge to go like, yeah, base Trump, like sticking it to the Pentagon, because they're probably just reallocating those troops somewhere else. But
No,
it is
I hate
interesting that
so
it's
much.
like
It's so stupid.
Yeah.
Like but I mean, I don't know.
I wonder if
yeah.
I wonder if we're like pivoting to a new epoch where the terror threat has to be in some sense incredibly vague, widespread, and hard to pin down, and not attributable to like any one human actor or group of actors, like which is basically kind of the paradigm of the coronavirus. Is like they don't want you to blame it on China, and I don't. I'm not personally. Like I wouldn't rule it out, but also
same. I
would resist the urge to jump to.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that we should certainly jump that conclusion, but it is intriguing that, like, I really do think that in a different political climate, really, I think that if we had like a Democratic president, then and Trump weren't known in a way for like stoking political tensions with other countries, and I think that due to the nature of like our interdependency with China in various ways, like I think the World Health Organization definitely played a role in trying to sort of mitigate any intimation in that direction. But I feel like under different political circumstances, that would have been given more consideration. And you know what, really, maybe it was given more consideration, like within the Trump administration, and in the same way, maybe it would have been given more consideration. I don't necessarily think a Democratic administration would have not considered it in the same way. I think maybe they would have considered it even more, and it would have been, given more of a hearing in the media, perhaps. Because I think
if it was like the sensible Clinton administration doing it, then I could see them, because because it is a very complex relationship.
They understand when we trust them, when they know when it's necessary to consider these problems like that type of thing. So
I think that's something to watch out for. That's something to watch out for going forward. Just as to think like, oh well, Biden will tamp down tensions against China. Well, he might just pursue an antagonistic course with China in a more sophisticated way. And who knows? Or maybe they blackmailed him with like Hunter Biden like dick photos. I don't know. Like that's quite possible too, because I don't think these people. The Bidens seem particularly sloppy
the Hunter Biden
about.
dick photos helped him though. They
kind of did. They did.
Yeah. But I did find this. I did find this article from summer 2002 that was published in Orbis. Called The Dark Winter of Biological Terrorism, which is kind of about the exercise by this dude, Peter J. Roman, who I guess was a Homeland Security fellow at some... he is a assistant professor at Duquesne University.
Duquesne. I think it's Duquesne. It's Duquesne. Yeah,
that has pronounced
those French words again.
Once again, wow, it's a French word too. Yeah, he was also a senior fellow at the Answer Institute for Homeland Security, and he wrote this interesting article, kind of reflecting on the exercise and on the nature of bioterrorism in general, like in 2002. So, and I think a lot of things that he said also have these sort of provocative resonances. He wrote, for instance, successfully deterring terrorists is difficult for a number of reasons. Terrorists often strike in a manner or at times when their targets are unaware and thus unable to issue a deterrent threat. Some terrorists will conceal their identities in order to avoid retaliation or other punishment for their actions. A few terrorists may be even undeterrable by virtue of their objectives or worldviews. These factors lead some to conclude that deterrence is a poor option to combat biological terrorism. As Christopher Chiba puts it, an actor who cannot be identified cannot be threatened. Certainly, from our Western perspective, the actions of suicidal terrorists such as those who perpetrated the September 11th attacks are so abhorrent and irrational that they are unfathomable. How on earth could we deter those who contemplate, much less execute, such acts? We might ask similar questions with the weaponization of the worst biological agents, such as smallpox or the Marburg virus. So this to me is like very similar to what you're saying, where, yeah, like that is all true, not only of, he's saying that of people who would use a disease for terroristic purposes, but of course it's also true of a disease. He also
it's just like it's like an axe murder cult. It doesn't care. It's like a Terminator.
Exactly.
It doesn't. You can't reason with it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. So he also wrote some things about the vaccine and the exercise. This was, it wasn't unlike Event 201, which was straight up coronavirus. This was like a smallpox thing, which was for a while kind of the go-to bioweapon that everyone sort of feared might be unleashed. And it's a very scary one. It's like disfiguring, etc. So
high mortality rate, right? Like pretty high mortality rate.
Yeah, it's
like
super deadly virus, and
leagues above coronavirus.
Yeah, no, if it were, if smallpox had gotten out, it would be, extremely brutal. But anyway, so this is like called false expectations of disease utility. After initial smallpox outbreaks in 3 states, the Dark Winter participants' deliberations immediately focused on the nation's stockpile of smallpox vaccine. For the participants, the vaccine seemed to offer the best chance to slow the spread of the disease at the earliest stages. They were told that the smallpox vaccine stockpile contained 50 million doses, with only about 12 million usable doses. Therefore, vaccine management became critical very early in the crisis. The participants decided to release several million doses of the vaccine to the infected areas, while reserving 2.5 million doses for the military, first responders, and government leaders. The remaining vaccine was held in the stockpile. Unfortunately, the vaccine had little visible effect on the spread of the smallpox in Dark Winter. Cases rose from several dozen in 3 states at the end of the first day to 2,000 cases in 15 states by the beginning of the 6th day. With the smallpox vaccine supply exhausted by the 14th day, the disease had grown to 16,000 cases in 25 states and spread to 15 other countries. Yes, and he continued to kind of talk about how this sort of failed. He said, faced with a smallpox outbreak of unknown proportions and a limited vaccine stockpile, the Dark Winter participants took great pains to fashion a vaccine policy that ensured the minimal amount of misuse and misdirection. Vaccine use in Dark Winter called for a, quote, ring strategy once a case was identified to inoculate those who had contact with an infected person. Since vaccine was the participants' only resource, it needed to be conserved for those most at risk. Consequently, they treated the vaccine more like an antidote than a vaccine. This had 3 important consequences. First, the longer the vaccine was held in reserve, the less valuable it became for slowing the disease. The geometric generation of new cases meant that the virus expanded more rapidly than the vaccination program could account for. By the exercise's midpoint, participants realized that the number of new cases would soon overwhelm the remaining vaccine supply. Secondly, the spread of the disease made any residual vaccine more valuable on black markets and susceptible to theft and diversion. Thus, the vaccine's economic value rose in the exercise precisely as its prophylactic value declined. This further complicated the participants' ability to manage the vaccine stockpile, which undermined public support for the government. Lastly, treating the vaccine like an antidote enabled participants to avoid consideration of other measures such as isolation, quarantine, or restrictions on public activity. These were politically undesirable for participants early in the crisis when the number of cases was small, precisely when such measures would have had the greatest impact on the disease. By the time Dark Winter participants approved quarantining the infected, the smallpox virus had reached epidemic proportions. So, yes, you can definitely see how a lot of that applies to what's unfolded here, although obviously the aspects of, smallpox are different from COVID. It's like,
Well, that is an interesting inverse correlation that the market value of the vaccine rises as its effectiveness, as its kind of overall, not medical effectiveness, but like its ability to stop the pandemic decreases. It becomes more valuable.
Yeah, exactly, because people saw it as being, an antidote, which is something that...
an antidote instead of a... I guess it is an antidote. Well, okay, so what...
It's not,
so, it's not an antidote, it's...
a vaccine, which, can help you develop, antibodies or, you know,
Yes.
an ability to fight the infection, but it doesn't, you know, it certainly doesn't cure COVID when you have it. And so treating it in that way is definitely wrong. And
I see. Yeah, it's not like
know,
a anti-venom serum or something that like you know, you can just inject and it'll reverse it. Yeah, yeah. It still has to. You have to not catch it in the first place, or you have to get the vaccine before you catch it, basically, or else you're screwed.
Yeah, probably the most, exactly. You're screwed if you don't, like, you know, it's preventative. You can't get a vaccine after the fact, because the whole thing is based on inoculation. Although I guess, like, these new mRNA vaccines are all about, like, programming your cells to create the virus themselves rather than introducing, you know, like, plasmids or whatever. I'm, like, using the completely wrong word, I'm sure, but, but the most interesting thing, perhaps, this guy wrote, or the most interesting section of this paper, is called "False Expectations of Degree of Control," and he writes, "The Dark Winter exercise, the September 11th attacks, and the anthrax attacks have confirmed the difference between homeland security and traditional approaches to national security with respect to political leaders' ability to direct resources and influence outcomes. The federal government cannot possess a degree of control over homeland security that it commands over national security. This frustrates the executive branch officials and engenders criticism from an expectant public. Governmental power in the United States is constrained in many ways, most notably through the federal structure, the separate branches that share powers, and limitations on regulating the private sphere, especially the marketplace. However, these limitations have traditionally had much less impact in the national security realm. When drafting the Constitution, the Founding Fathers saw the need to concentrate national defense powers in the federal government. This seemed entirely logical and appropriate for the United States, as the principal national security threats were external rather than internal. Further, the values of military organizations, hierarchy, obedience, orders, etc., that enable political leaders to exercise civilian control conflict with the values of a liberal society. This anomalous place of national security within the American state and society regularly produced irritants, fears of a professional military separate from the rest of a liberal society, or worries about inadequate democratic checks over national security organizations have cropped up routinely in American history. Still, the concentration of national security power in the federal government accelerated as a result of the United States' experience in World War II and the Cold War. Consequently, the American public and political leaders have looked to a powerful president in control of all the instruments of government during national security crises. Most presidents have readily obliged and taken up the mantle of action. Homeland security changes how the American state and its leaders protect society. As in any liberal democratic society, many of the institutions essential for the effective functioning of society reside outside of the federal government, or perhaps any governmental entity. Americans depend on state and local governments, public authorities, and the private sector to provide public health, finance, telecommunications, energy, public works, and countless other goods and services. Terrorists seeking to shock and disrupt American society will find lucrative targets within each level of government and in the private sector. Consider how the September 11th attacks stretch across entities including the federal government, the Pentagon, the Federal Aviation Administration, state and local governments, city governments in Washington, D.C. and New York City, the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, and the Massachusetts Port Authority, and countless private sector companies, e.g. United Airlines, American Airlines, Argon Bright Security, and the tenants of the World Trade Center. The terrorists successfully exploited the gaps between these different entities to generate devastating effects. The Dark Winter exercise and the anthrax attacks have revealed some impediments to federal leadership during biological terrorist strikes. The usual problems of access to accurate information and crisis management are exacerbated in cases of biological terrorism, where routine, familiar communications channels probably do not exist between policymakers and those who hold critical information, particularly the public health sector. Critical information may be transmitted either erratically or not at all. This is, of course, accentuated by the time needed to detect and diagnose cases of biological terrorism. These information problems undermine the ability of policymakers to assess the situation, formulate a prompt response, and convey their message to the public. Dark Winter participants sought more information on the smallpox outbreaks early in the exercise, only to find that it wasn't available. One participant kept pleading, "Just give me the facts," but the experts had no ready answers. Similar problems are apparent in the Bush administration's reaction to the anthrax attacks, particularly with respect to the postal system and issues of cross-contamination. Presidents and other federal officials possess little, if any, authority to direct many of those on the front lines of biological terrorism and other homeland security crises. The disparity between federal efforts to produce activity and the responsiveness of state, local, and private sector officials is clear in both Dark Winter and the anthrax attacks. Dark Winter participants found that governors fought to maintain control over the National Guard. In the exercise scenario, the governor of Texas used the state police and the Texas National Guard to enforce his, not the president's, suspension of any transportation between his state and Oklahoma, where the smallpox outbreaks began. Fortunately, one does not find problems in this order of magnitude in the current anthrax crisis, although they are still present. California Governor Gray Davis's public announcement of potential threats against West Coast bridges rankled some federal officials. As one told Newsweek, once you tell the locals, these guys can't stop running to cameras. Similarly, some postal union officials have sought and received judicial remedy to protect their members from perceived workplace dangers. One could easily imagine that such conflicts would be magnified as homeland security threats and biological terrorism increased. Homeland Security expands the range of institutions involved far beyond the traditional national security establishment. Suddenly, postal workers, healthcare professionals, local law enforcement, and countless others find themselves on the front lines of a new type of war. Unlike those in the national security bureaucracy, they neither signed up for nor are legally obligated to fight this war. Whether or how they choose to do so will determine America's effectiveness in homeland security. Thus, homeland security requires an unprecedented integration of effort across all levels of government and with the private sector to deter, prevent, and respond to terrorist attacks. While the president must lead this effort, he cannot rely on his authority to command, but must persuade many actors to cooperate towards the common objective of homeland security. So, yes.
Interesting.
This is... Yeah, what I think that this speaks a lot to what we're seeing play out now, where there's this false expectation of control that would map up with the, a more conventional type of threat that I guess, this guy would associate with a national security problem, which is different from, I guess, the new paradigm that he's, I guess, among other people at this point, at the turn of the, 21st century after 9/11, trying to establish the new paradigm of homeland security, which is much more integrated and requires basically the enlistment of, like, postal workers, healthcare professionals, etc.,
media
and
people,
countless others, aka all of us, on the front lines of this new war. The new homeland security paradigm is different, where there's not enough control as you would expect. One solution, which I guess is the one that he was saying, is that the president, can't rely on his authority command. He must persuade. But there's obviously been some failure to persuade in many respects. So one wonders what will happen. I mean,
well, that's an interesting thing to throw into the mix, and then think about it in light of Trump being the president when the Corona event basically happened, because I think if it had been like a boring milquetoast Republican, or if it had been Hillary Clinton, I mean, she probably would have gotten a lot of shit from right-wing folks who thought she was doing some New World Order bullshit.
It would have been the opposite situation where, like, like believing
like this persuasion was almost in, like, this part of his recommendations kind of, really couldn't be utilized in the Trump era, because all of these official organizations, in particular the media, were kind of existentially dead set on kind of like refusing his influence, basically standing up to him and basically, criticizing him in almost any kind of instance that would come about. And his power of persuading them, the CNNs of the world.
He had no ability to persuade all the people that he named, except for possibly local law enforcement. Those were the only people who he had to be cachet with. Not postal workers, not healthcare professionals, and certainly not the media. Yeah, like he, was probably the most, like, very, very loathed by the media as a president. So, like, they, like, anything that he was associated with, they were liable to take issue with in some way.
Remember he had to
owed him any favors.
For sure. Remember how they stopped, like, having him come out and do daily press conferences after a while because they were so combative, and and then he would say certain things that would just freak people out, like the bleach thing, which, like, it's like, whatever. Okay, he said something stupid. Like, calm down. Like, I don't know, like, people were going on for months about how he told, his supporters to inject themselves with bleach, like, wow, like, get this fascist out, like, just freaking out. And but it was not an ideal situation to have somebody who was getting everybody on the same page. And so we're almost
that he said people should inject themselves with bleach, but
no, it's not. Or do some kind of bleach thing. Basically, we were set up for a particularly vulnerable window of time where we wouldn't have this like smooth technocratic synergy where I think if like Obama had been president when this happened, or Clinton, I think you could have kind of mismanaged just as much stuff in an actual way in terms of logistics and resources and things like that. But the perception of it, the mass psychological perception of it would have been different with a large segment of the population.
Yeah, absolutely, it would have been different. Definitely the optics of having Trump in power and like all the main symbols of COVID. I mean, the big one is the masks. The aversion, it's become a political wedge issue where there is an aversion to like the observance of, and it's and people who have like kind of a refractive sensibility around these things in general, when people are being kind of patronizing or disciplinarian and trying to make you do something that's miserable, like anyone who has like a kind of understandingly kind of a refractionary response to that, there's that aspect as well, but especially among people who have an investment in Trump or, which is often kind of goes hand in hand with like a hatred of like legacy media. And for various reasons.
Well-credentialed elites, all the Dr. Guptas, telling them what to do, the Tik Tok doctors, all those people.
Yes.
And it actually, it reminds me, it intersects with something that we brought up near the end of the Grateful Dead episode, which I think is like an interesting longer term trend that I think is like relevant to all of this, which is like sort of the decades long creation of the atomized neoliberal subject colliding with this unique crisis where certain types of collectivist action, for lack of a better term, are required to effectively deal with it, and the friction between those two things, and how, in a weird way, I think there's like two lines. Of course, there's the obvious, like, my body, my mask, like, fuck you, I'm not wearing the face diaper, like, I'm gonna do whatever I want, like, don't tread on me, you could imagine there's probably some, aging deadheads out there that, are like, whatever, man, though maybe they're all, like, they're all COVID
so much
pilled,
DMT
I don't know.
that, like, Jabba the Hutt gave me an aura of, like, protection against, like, all pathogens simply pass through my body because I've ascended in my studies with the Klaxtons.
Exactly. It's something like that. Yeah. Or on the other hand, the kind of like there's a kind of like inverse of that, which is like if I perceive you to be like somebody who's not taking COVID seriously enough, then you are like a threat to me and like my family and to society in general. And so I'm going to scold you. I'm going to like try to shame people that like aren't doing the right thing. You see a lot of trends with that kind of on the liberal trust science side right now but I think that in a weird way, it's like, it's easy to say, oh, this is like, Maoist collectivism, like rising up with like these rad lib kind of people. But I don't think it's quite that. I don't think that, in a weird way, it's almost like a sort of pseudo-collectivist impulse that still rises from like a very neoliberal mentality of like, you can't infringe on my safe virus-free space, and I don't know. I mean, I think there's definitely, situations where you could kind of, I think it maybe would be a valid, social faux pas to like walk into a tightly enclosed, kind of place with like poor airflow and like not wear a mask and like refuse to like put one on. You know what I mean? Like there's kind of like you know, we don't know enough about the particulars of this virus still to kind of like really say. So like maybe err on the side of, you know, not like I wouldn't call everybody who, you know, objects to like that type of individual doing anything like that you know, a crazy Karen or an asshole, but like there's definitely a vibe of people that, you know, I see around LA right now, like something that confuses me, which is people walking around or like walking their dogs or even jogging like on empty streets with nobody around, and they're wearing masks, and it's like that I don't even think like the health experts have said that like you need to wear a mask when you're like jogging by yourself with nobody around you. Like as far as we know, like there's no evidence that the virus floats around outdoors and like you can catch it by walking around in open air. So like why are people doing it? And then that's got to be either like a psychological thing that they're scared enough by what they're seeing on like the media that they feel like they have to do that, or it's kind of like this ritual thing. It's like a form of identification, like I'm doing my part. I'm wearing my mask, and like, or it's a fear of being judged for not wearing the mask. Like you don't want to have your neighbor give you the stink eye. And I've heard stories from people that are like, that go around jogging and stuff, and they'll see kind of, you know, they'll pass people on their route who kind of get like mean mug them for not wearing a mask when they're running by themselves. Yeah. And it's kind of like, well, what's that all about? You know, and I think that, and maybe that comes to the kind of, maybe one of the grand, supposed objectives of like all of this Silicon Valley stuff that is like taking over the economy now, is it's kind of like promoting a sort of like pseudo collectivism that has all of like you know, just the way we talked about, like, you know, is studying Marx or Maoism very closely to see like how can we instrumentalize these practices of social organization to build our own organizations that can be effective, but also get rid of all that like revolutionary class struggle content and like bury all of that. In a similar way, it's like, let's all become collectivized and, you know, rise up to the struggle and you know, let's have propaganda on TV telling us like all the right thing to do. Let's all wear our mask and like let's judge and shame and like cancel people who like aren't following this you know, this sort of mass movement to like save the world. But it's like it's not a real. It's still kind of based a lot on, I think, maybe a kind of like like a neoliberal individualism a little bit, and it's not going to make us like we're still going to have like, are we going to have a collectivized pod society where 10 corporations run everything and surveil us every second of our lives, and it's like we live in public, but like we're going to be tricked into thinking, we the masses are going to be tricked into thinking that like you know, everything's being shared, that we live in like a sharing economy. That term has even popped up the last like 10 years. Yeah, of course, like the sharing economy, you know, instead of an ownership economy. So basically like you won't own anything. No wealth is really going to be redistributed in a meaningful way. It's still all going up to like the global superclass at the top, but you're going to feel like you're a part of like, yeah, almost in this like pseudo socialist or communalist kind of way, that you're like, you know, connected in this I don't know, it just it kind of it gives me the willies a little bit to see kind of it happening. And I think that
yeah, I mean, people like well, you know, yeah, it's interesting. Like I personally like, I mean, I don't mind the masks like on principle. I mean, I guess I don't like the difficulty of breathing in them, but you know, I don't like mind like the phenomenon of people wearing them. I guess like you know, maybe it's because of my like general aversion to eye contact and things like that, that like you know, I don't have like, you know, reading faces, maybe I don't mind so much as others, but you know, like but you know, it also does make me think of how like you know, for instance, like the idea of a veiled woman, you know, is something that to many people is just like inherently like evil and like scary and like wrong. You know, like if you see someone in like the cab, like that is just like flat out like, you know, you just show a picture of that and associate it with something, and then like thereby that thing is like bad by association because that is self-evidently bad. You know what I mean? So it's the same thing, like, you know, where I think that people have, like, the same thing with masks, where, like, oh, well, you know, there's just something about this that is just feels self-evidently, like, on some sort of, like, cultural, like, level wrong or something like that. And I think that is, it's interesting, like, to bring up, like, Maoism or whatever, or, like, a capitalized sort of, like, technocratic form of Maoism, because I think that even though, you know, whatever you want to say about whether China's, like, numbers are real or not, I do find it pretty easy to believe that they've done a better job of dealing with this than the United States has. And I think that part of the reason for that is, like, you know, both of us having been to China, I think that, like, without, you know, like, making any broad generalizations or, you know, propounding any kind of stereotypes, I think that we can say that China is good at marshaling, like, its population. Like, you know, the Chinese government is good at marshaling its population to take collective action and to unite around, like, certain goals and programs, you know, in a way that our institutions aren't necessarily.
Absolutely.
And I mean, it's also a culture where, like, masking or, like, you know, for health reasons is relatively normal, like, you know, prior to this. Like, that also, I think, might be a factor. And yeah, I think that, you know, the whole, like, the aspect of, there's a problem where it just, it runs into a level where you cannot force people to do certain things. And, like, I was reading this article that I mentioned to you before we started recording that was sort of a comparison between the smallpox outbreak in Yugoslavia in 1972 with the sort of fictional smallpox outbreak in Dark Winter. And that smallpox outbreak had certain parallels to what we're experiencing now, where, you know, it was something that originated among, like, a small population of Muslims, of Kosovo Albanians, that actually started with a pilgrim, you know, I guess, to Karbala. And, you know, he had come back to the community and had started to spread, and their initial attempt was trying to use a strategy that was kind of used in Dark Winter, which was ring vaccination, where you vaccinate people, you know, around, you know, people who are confirmed. You know, you do a contact tracing, and then you vaccinate the people who are, you know, in contact with that person. But, you know, the problem was that a lot of those, you know, people in that community were distrustful of the government due to, like, longstanding tensions, like, between majoritarian forces and, you know, the Muslim community of Albanians in Kosovo that, you know, have come to a head at various times in history. So, like, they wouldn't disclose their associations. There was talk that, like, you know, this was a government plot to exterminate the Albanian people, you know, which was something that, again, like, much like, you know, now, where people, like, you know, maybe they have, like, certain people might have, like, a legitimate reason to feel suspicious of vaccines due to, like, the way that they've been used against, like, you know, different communities, especially, like, abroad, in various ways. Like, so there's, like, legitimate reasons for certain people's suspicion, especially in this case. You can't really fault them for the concerns that they had, which is that this was some kind of plot against them, and that they would induce abortions or something. These vaccines are cause sterility. So eventually the government kind of threw up its hands, and what they had to do was just, you know, go in and surround entire villages and just vaccinate them. And, you know, they forcibly isolated suspected cases, you know, and they makeshift hospitals and camps. And, you know, like, then once it spread to Belgrade, they were like, you know, we're gonna stockpile the vaccine here. But that's, like, what it came to. And, of course, it's a very different social situation, like, in the United States. However, like, the same aspects are present, where there's distrust of the government, like, among certain sectors of the population for various reasons, both legitimate and illegitimate, and the mechanisms of persuasion, like, are probably not going to be effective And when those don't
Sure.
work, one wonders like what the solution is going to be.
Well, I mean, it is worth noting that just like in the case, the way you mentioned with China, and you could also probably throw Cuba and Vietnam into this mix in terms of like their relatively like responsible and contained handling of the coronavirus, that, you know, this is another case in Yugoslavia where you had a communist country, even with all the sort of socio-ethnic tensions that basically dogged the rollout of like responding to this thing, they were able to basically squash it with, I think, maybe like 130 people died, something along those lines. And they were able to basically eradicate it in a kind of short amount of time.
They were. But they had to use extremely authoritarian... I mean, ultimately, like, you could say, like, you know, it's you have to do like a you know, cost-benefit analysis in a way. Like, they did have to use pretty, like, measures that would be considered pretty authoritarian in order to do it. They did do it, which is good. Because, like, you know, if it had spread further, that would have been horrible.
They didn't kill anybody. Like, they didn't throw anybody in a gulag. I mean, it wasn't really that bad. I'm going to stand up for my socialist Yugoslavia a little bit here and say, like, but I mean, you could see. But
if something like that happened in the United States, you cannot imagine, like, what the response would be. Like, you know, like,
well, exactly.
Say, like, the idea of, like, you know, forced vaccination. Like, you know, establishing makeshift hospitals,
like if you were
camps,
to say,
you know,
if
like,
you were to take a similar, if you're going to take a similar group like the Chabad Lubavitchers in New York, like, okay, we're going to move all you guys to a camp because you refuse to get vaccinated.
We're going to surround, you know, like, we're going to surround, like, this area of, like, Bed-Stuy or whatever. And, like,
to be fair, though, in New Rochelle, early on in COVID, they did send in the National Guard. It looked like one of those 90s pandemic movies. They sent in the National Guard to New Rochelle, where a lot of Chabad Lubavitchers and Hasidic Jews live, where it was one of the earliest outbreaks. And, I mean, I don't think that, you know, they didn't, like, you know, march anybody down the streets with guns or anything, but there were like Humvees and tanks and kind of, it was weird. It was kind of a weird show of like force. I don't even know why the National Guard felt like they had to go there, but of course there was a lot of controversy about shutting down the synagogues and how they didn't want to do that. And they don't feel like vaccines are not kosher, and they kind of don't want to have anything to do with any of that stuff. So then where does the line get drawn where now we have to, and I think that's kind of the scary road maybe that we are heading down, this dark winter of people starting to entertain the idea, when, especially if, like we've said, the vaccine isn't the one knockout punch that everyone hoped it would be. Like, is there going to be a move in the kind of popular public discourse about, well, like, maybe we need to, you know, there have been ideas floated, like maybe we should tie the next stimulus check to proof that you got the vaccine. You know, John Delaney, erstwhile presidential candidate, said that on TV a little while ago. And while, I mean, I don't think that's actively on the table right now. I think they'll probably pass a reduced check or whatever, you know, without forcing you to get vaxxed. You could easily see Bill Gates, I think, has talked about, you know, vaccine passport apps that, you know, you could have on your phone. And stuff and so you could start to see, I mean, in a way, it's like maybe less like, you know, if we're going to entertain the sort of the mark of the beast thing, you know, perhaps it's less like the vaccine itself, but it's going to be like this vaccine passport thing feels a little mark of the beastie, and like that you're going to have to, I don't know, even in a psychological level, it's like you're going to have to prove that you injected yourself with something to be a full participant in IRL society. You know, you're going to have to do this.
It's a viscerally troubling notion. I mean, I like, for some of the Mark of the Beast stuff, I feel like it's getting like a little bit, like, again, it's like kind of facile, and there's like many aspects of, I think that it's part of it, like, as you said, like, I think that part of it is the invasiveness of like injections, and that combined with the element of surveillance is maybe what people react to so strongly. In terms of like the surveillance and like the slow slide into a kind of Beastian paradigm, I feel like that doesn't necessarily require an aspect of vaccination, like, per se.
You're right.
And like the biopolitical control over people is like advancing no matter what. However, like, you know, it's this is definitely like part of that. And like, you know, it's going to be, again, these are the problems they encountered when they did the Dark Winter exercise. You know, they encountered issues of like, okay, well, do we do this, or like, you know, are we gonna respect people's civil liberties, you know, or are we gonna do everything that we can to stop the spread, you know, to flatten the curve? And I think that it is going to be, because the whole persuasion technique is not gonna work. Like, it's not gonna work. Like, you know, I think that your average person, like, you know, you know, even if there's nothing to this, like, even if there's no reason to really be afraid of the vaccine, like, I feel like, honestly, even I would almost be liable to just, like, you know, because I don't really usually even get flu shots, to be honest with you, like, partially
I don't either,
like, you know, but I feel like a lot of people might feel like, okay, well, other people will get it, so, like, I don't need to worry about it, like, or, you know, so I think that might happen. Like, I don't think that, like, and the vaccine, you know, it's not an antidote. And we've kind of passed the point where I think these vaccines are going to, you know, they're going to make this end, you know? So, like, people are going to be dissatisfied. Maybe, like, at first, like, it could be people are like, you know, well, people aren't taking the vaccine enough. But I don't think that even if there's a vaccine passport, that, like, this will necessarily stop. I don't know. We'll have to see, because I really don't know what will happen at the other end of the Dark Winter. Like, when will this be over?
It go back to normal. I don't, unless we go to a new normal. And you know what? We're at like an hour 30 right now, so maybe it's a good time to pause and take a break, and then maybe we can talk a little bit about like the Great Reset, and maybe then you can mention the Clade X simulation from 2018. Oh, and Event 201, and like then the Great Reset, and like maybe are there some clues in this that tell us like what kind of world they're trying to conjure?
Who will be the first to tell me of a past adventure?
Why don't you tell him about the time we faced Doom?
All right. Well, as I remember, Doom had threatened the world leaders with destruction of every major city on Earth. Headquarters.
Good evening.
Would you believe it? It's Doom on the phone.
What's on your evil mind?
Hold your insulting tongue and mark my words well. I have plotted my revenge on you. Now I shall have it. Bid farewell to your friends.
Doom hates us all. But in his warped mind, he has a personal score to settle with me.
It'd be worth mentioning the sequels to Dark Winter. There were at least two of them, two major ones, that we also discovered in researching this. The first of which was Atlantic Storm from January 2005. Very similar, also involved Johns Hopkins University, and was sponsored by the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, the German Marshall Fund of the United States, and the Nuclear Threat Initiative. German Marshall Fund is like very sus and like kind of, you know, National Endowment for Democracy type, like CIA NGO. But anyways, so the main difference with this one was it was still a terrorist smallpox attack, but instead of hitting one or two parts of the United States, like in Dark Winter, it hit multiple international cities. It hit Istanbul, Rotterdam, Warsaw, Frankfurt, New York City, and Los Angeles. And I guess, you know, basically the virus was exported to various other countries within hours, and it got pretty bad. And I guess the the overall purpose was to test the international cooperation element to reacting to a bioterror attack. And naturally, the scenario assumed that the viral ingredients were obtained from a bioweapons facility in Russia. So once again, it's interesting in light of the criticisms that you outlined of needing to frame this in like a homeland security, like terrorism context, how they all three of these main exercises, the later one was Clade X from 2018, they all basically involve a like deliberately spread, sometimes even like specially manufactured lethal, pandemic virus, basically, to unleash, or a bacteria or whatever. And it's not until Event 201 from late last year that, I mean, there may have been other exercises that we haven't covered, but in terms of like very big notable ones, that seemed to be the first one that that mirrored kind of what we've gone through in 2020, which is like a quote unquote the assumption of an accidental release of a virulent coronavirus, as opposed to a deliberate attack by a nation state or by some terrorists or things like that. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe,
right. And that's that was hosted by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which is like a little bit different.
Yes, still involving Johns Hopkins, but
right, yeah,
and the World Economic Forum, which previously had not gotten into this game. So the inclusion of Bill Gates and the WEF is a little bit curious, or it's just it's worth noting. Yeah,
or maybe like they obviously, Bill Gates obviously has different priorities in terms of I just feel like, I don't know, well, certainly in a post 9/11 climate, even in 2005, part of the point of these things, and also the infection rates are also just they're depicted worse than I think they even are historically. And the whole point of these things is that no matter what they do, it's going to be horrible, because the point is to scare people, or to scare the participants who are policymakers into doing something. It doesn't seem to have well, that's the idea anyway. That's what the point of these war games is, or these sort of gaming scenarios, is to scare the participants into taking action about something. So
yes.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I guess it's still held at Johns Hopkins, but maybe the goals of the organizing, the organizations organizing it are a little bit different, or I wonder, because Event 201 has definitely, Bill Gates is a big, he's a big villain of the pandemic kind of narrative, so maybe that's part of why Event 201 has stuck out, whereas usually when these things are organized for Congress or whatever, maybe they do kind of have that bioterror aspect.
That's kind of perhaps not Bill Gates's bag. Bill Gates doesn't, on the surface, Bill Gates doesn't do homeland security, counterterrorism type stuff. That's not what he's interested in. That's not what moves him. It's really about global health and education. And just connecting that he has a much more benign sweater kind of persona that doesn't lend itself, where you have all these old diplomats and generals and CIA spooks. However, if you scratch just a little bit below the surface of Event 201, you'll find that one of the players in that is newly nominated CIA girl boss director Avril Haines.
Yeah.
So she was.
So maybe she'll have internalized some of the lessons of Event 201.
Yeah, she might. I didn't see the cast list necessarily, but she may have played the director of the CIA in Event 201.
That's interesting. I wonder what I assume the big takeaway of Event 201 was similar to that of Dark Winter, just we're extremely poorly prepared, and we need to, make these changes post haste. But I wonder if there's anything specific, to that.
I'm trying to access the a paper that was written about Event 201. maybe it's like a really detailed breakdown of exactly,
they did
what its conclusions were.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I guess maybe this was written in advance. Oh, there is a cast list. LaToya Abbott, Risk Management and Global Senior Director, Occupational Health Services for the Marriott. There was Sophia Borges, Senior Vice President of the UN Foundation. Brad Connett, President of the U.S. Medical Group. Christopher Elias, President, Global Development Division at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Tim Evans, former Senior Director of Health for the World Bank Group. George Gao, Director General, Chinese Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Avril Haines, like you said, former Deputy Director, CIA, former Deputy National Security Advisor. Jane Halton, Board Member, ANZ Bank. Matthew Harrington, Global Chief Operations Officer, Edelman. Martin Knutschel, Head of Crisis, Emergency, and Business Continuity Management at Lufthansa Group Airlines.
Lufthansa, yeah.
Yeah. Eduardo Martinez, President at the UPS Foundation. Stephen Redd, Hatsi Taghi, Adrian Thomas. Hatsi Taghi, I guess, is Vice President Executive Advisor at NBC Universal Media. Adrian Thomas, Johnson & Johnson, Vice President. Lavan Thiru, Chief Representative, Monetary Authority of Singapore. So this seems like, it's definitely very different tenor just in terms of the kind of people involved, whereas Dark Winter is much more, U.S.-centered, where someone's playing the president. It seems almost like these are, like, the technocrats who are going to be, modeling, like, what decisions they'll be making, and, that type of thing, like having, maybe the postal workers. So,
yeah. Well, I just noticed, looking at it here, that the the World Economic Forum actually was involved with CladeX in 2018. So that was their first foray into pandemic simulations. And I guess they liked it so much, they signed up for another one in 2019. And I guess they both... I'm reading from a pretty an article that does not trust these people, so we'll see what direction it goes in. But I guess it does summarize that both simulations concluded that the world was not prepared for a global pandemic, and a few short months following the conclusion of Event 201, which specifically simulated a coronavirus outbreak, the WHO officially declared that the coronavirus had reached pandemic status on March 11th, 2020. And I guess this is a quote from Event 201. The next severe pandemic will not only cause great illness and loss of life, but could also trigger major cascading economic and societal consequences that could contribute greatly to global impact and suffering. What the fuck is global impact? Like, you know what I mean? Like kind of weaselly terms there.
Contributing to global impact doesn't really make any sense. You could say have a global impact, like have a big global impact and cause a lot of suffering or something. I
guess they want
global impact and suffering.
I think they're kind of dancing around the thing where the part where all like a huge swath of like global wealth gets funneled into like the bank accounts of like several hundred billionaires and associated families, etc., and impoverishes the whole world, I guess. But they don't want to say that because they're the very people that would benefit from this type of pandemic triggered economic collapse. It says right here that this article is about Klaus Schwab, the Great Reset, and the WEF's, all the connections between that and Bill Gates and, these simulations and everything. They write here that since October 2019, just about every scenario covered in the CladeX and Event 201 simulations has come into play, including governments implementing lockdowns worldwide, the collapse of many industries, growing mistrust between governments and citizens, a greater adoption of biometric surveillance technologies, social media censorship in the name of combating misinformation, the desire to flood communication channels with, quote, authoritative sources, a global lack of personal protective equipment, the breakdown of international supply chains, mass unemployment, rioting in the streets, and a whole lot more. And then, just like... just out of the blue, after the nightmare scenarios had been fully materialized by mid-2020, the WEF founder, Klaus Schwab, declared, quote, now is the time for a great reset in June of this year. Was it excellent forecasting, planning, and modeling on the part of the WEF and partners that Clade X and Event 201 turned out to be so prophetic, or was there something more to it? Well, I don't know. Is there something more to it?
I mean,
feels that way.
I mean, it definitely is interesting that, like, this same center that did Dark Winter eventually did this. That kind of, and you can follow the different the different sort of exercises from Dark Winter to Clade X to Atlantic Storm, or Dark Winter to Atlantic Storm to Clade X, and then to this, and you can see how the framing is transforming in real time in a way where, like, originally it's like very hyper focus on that bioterrorism angle and has all the attendant blind spots, and a lot of the response kind of dealt with the blind spots involved in that, and the fact that that very paradigm is not, or like, it's sort of the way that it changes, like, it's still like the same DNA or the same RNA, if you will, where, like, it's the same basic, like, war scenario, the same basic war game, but it's changed to reflect the landscape of the war in, like, through an evolving understanding of how these things are post 9/11. Just like, that dude, I think it was Roman, the guy who wrote the Dark Winter of Biological Terrorism article, that Answer Homeland Security fellow, just like he said, like, national security is a different thing from Homeland Security, where, like, there are all these different people, like having the UPS guy there. Like, there was no UPS guy at Dark Winter, He said, like, that exact thing was, like, postal workers are involved in this war, things like that.
Well, I mean, you see it trickle down throughout
anthrax, but but they
you
did
do
have
see
a
it
role
trickle
to play in this,
you do see it trickle down, like, if you see something, say something. Remember those billboards all over the New York subways, in the 2000s? It kind of, like, trying to deputize almost everybody into this, like, broader effort, or just realizing that you have to do that. And it probably has something to do also with the construction of DHS fusion centers after 9/11 in every kind of metropolitan area. Like, every region in the country has, like, an intelligence fusion center that kind of never get talked about anymore, but they still absolutely exist. And, they synthesize kind of, like, I think maybe even in some cases foreign intelligence with FBI, with DHS, with all the other big agencies and local law enforcement. And I think even that was, like, in some ways, I've seen some stuff that it was kind of modeled after. The prototype for that was developed in the Phoenix program in Vietnam, of course. Anyways, like, in general, you do see, like, this idea that you need to go deeper than just kind of a top-down national security president calling the shots kind of thing. It needs to seep into the groundwater,
right? Well,
basically, of, like, the entire culture.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, like, at this point there are people who are, like, 20 years old, which is mind-boggling to me. Like, people who are, I guess, 19 or 20, who, like, their whole lives have had, like, Homeland Security being, like, a big thing. But I remember, like, before and after, like, Homeland Security, like, there was a DHS, I remember that. Like, and this is a whole new, like, area that, like, has kind of been opened up, and, like, it's people have been theorizing about how to really secure the homelands, and the understanding of that has evolved in a way where, it might not even be, like, under the umbrella even of the term Homeland Security. Like, you wouldn't necessarily associate Event 201 with such a thing, but, like, it still is in that lineage, from the center's earlier exercises at the same center at Johns Hopkins, with involvement of a lot of the same parties, maybe not Bill Gates, but, like, a lot of the same parties at the same sort of, thing, convened in the same way. It's interesting. I don't know if, like, that means, like I said, I think that, like, people knew. It was a question of if, like, it wasn't a question of if, it was a question of when there was going to be, like, a coronavirus pandemic. But obviously it was something that was expected, and there were, like, mechanisms in place, and there were, certain people were more attuned to the, that eventuality than others. And, I definitely think that it has been instrumentalized in certain ways by, I mean, that's not really debatable. And, like, that there's a level at which as we kind of talked about, there's like the bare facts of science and logic. They do go through, despite like what a lot of people reflexively think, where like the science is what it is. They are filtered through a certain prism of the social implementation of these things. In the same way where like there's a social aspect to how these pandemics manifest in terms of like the layout of society, the different social structures, the different aspects of inequality or whatever. It was such in the Yugoslavian example, what an impact the socio-ethnic tensions, as you mentioned, as strong, it had contributed to a great impact. I think that also like that contributes to a great impact here as well.
It also makes me think that when these guys come out and they say with Cladex and Event 201 that like what we've learned from this is that the United States is not, there's a supreme irony going on when these guys come out and say that our exercise demonstrates that the United States is not ready for a pandemic of this magnitude and, what could happen as a result of it. But the actual purpose of the exercise, I feel, is that they're getting prepared, not necessarily getting prepared to, just like meet the public health challenge, but in a way like they were not totally caught unawares by the developments that came out of this crisis, and in a way like it's like the ruling class was prepared for this, whether even leaving aside the question of like how did this virus like emerge or escape or do whatever it did, like where did it really come from, is there any kind of like agency behind it being released? I don't know, but either, regardless of what way you cut it, they were ready for something like this to come down the pike so that it could absolutely capitalize on it. And
that's what's interesting because,
as a cataclysm.
That's like the thing. Like, really, like if you follow it back to like if you put this in the same lineage as Dark Winter, which you definitely can, and you say this is this has really been something that they've been like training on since 2001. And if you look at it one way, it's like, oh wow, they didn't do anything, like they didn't implement like any of the lessons that they were supposed to have learned from this. Like, this still like, it was still basically like there was nothing in place to deal with this. The preparedness that you would think wasn't there, but like it's definitely something that in these sectors people have been like thinking about and engaging with and considering, at least. Certainly, like, anyone who attended anyone who attended Dark Winter or Event 201 or subsequently heard a report about it from a participant or was briefed on it in any way probably gave like significantly more thought to like this type of thing than like the average person did. Was it fully sufficient? Like, I think that certainly, like, some people, I think certainly Bill Gates, probably spends a lot of time thinking about the eventuality of a pandemic, and other such people who were, like, very interested in that idea.
Thirsting for it.
Certainly, like, more than the average person, even though there's, maybe a range within such people. I think that, I don't know. You could say, like, that there was a lack of preparedness, but maybe, like, the lack of preparedness they just weren't prepared in the ways that you would want. Then that was maybe perhaps something that just wasn't a priority.
It goes back to like whose power are they serving, like whose interests are they serving, and it is not, there's the esoteric and the exoteric kind of description of what they're up to, and it's pretty easy for them to kind of just like not even, I feel like Event 201 is almost curious in kind of how suspicious it looks, but then he knows that nobody on CNN is going to ask him about it. Nobody, you know what I mean? Like, no serious journalist is going to bump up against Bill Gates. In fact, I just thought, we've been playing a little bit fast and loose with the facts right now. So I think it's time for a fact check from usatoday.com. I found this great article. It's not quite a no comma, but it is a literal like fact check : a Bill Gates backed pandemic simulation in October did not predict COVID-19. So this is like in March 26th, at like the scariest like first wave.
I mean, how could you say that it didn't predict COVID-19? I think that it's a different level of reasonability to say like that this wasn't like a proof that Bill Gates did something to cause the COVID pandemic. That's one thing, which I think like it's certainly a reasonable thing to at least, you know, like that's definitely on a different, but to say that it didn't predict it, like that was the point of it, was to predict it.
Yeah, it was like it practiced for it. It just, you could say it's a coincidence, but
that's like the annoying thing. Like, you know, like that's like the annoying, like that's like what's the kind of the same thing of like no, sir, like you will not give people the virus by getting the vaccine. You know, it's the kind of the same thing. Like, you know, like no, it did not predict it, like because, you know, like you know what they're actually arguing about, but like
well,
wrong.
I think
of course it did.
This is also the really like important thing that is happening throughout this entire year is like the perception management going on, and how I think it's reached a level of sophistication that must have been informed by some of these exercises to some degree, because they do all talk about like the need to get everybody on board, like down to the, you know, the postal worker. Like you need to get kind of the media on message, like don't tell local politicians things because they'll run around to the press, like, you know, can like kind of like control the flow of information. And now with social media and everything else, like it's so much easier. But I guess in this USA Today article, I just think the tone of like news today it's definitely something that's driving me up a wall to some degree. Like the kind of cheap editorializing of like hard news coverage, and especially these conspiracy debunker articles that have proliferated in, you know, 2020 from every major outlet. So like this is what it says about, okay, so it bolds the claim: Bill Gates and the World Economic Forum predicted the coronavirus pandemic. As the COVID-19 pandemic disrupts the globe, rumors abound online about the origin. On March 16th, @Freedom Faction posted an image on Instagram along with the claim that, quote, COVID-19 was launched a month after billionaire Bill Gates hosted a high-level pandemic exercise event. Quote, #Bill Gates hosted a closed-door meeting for global elites, and the invitation came with a COVID-19 coronavirus plush toy. A few months later, thousands would be dead. The participants of Event 201, invited there by the rich and powerful elites that rule the world, sat and wargamed how an outbreak of COVID-19 coronavirus might go. Looks like the meeting was a success, because just 1 month to the day later, the first case of COVID-19 was reported in China, and well, you know the rest. And you know, so okay, that's obviously putting a spin on it. But all it says is conspiracy theories about the event have circulated online for months. A January 29th article posted on the website Humans Are Free claimed the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the World Economic Forum had conducted a pandemic simulation, quote, just 6 weeks before the real outbreak. They did. That's literally true. Like, that's not false. The article then goes on to say, quote, that is one hell of a coincidence if you believe in that sort of thing. It heavily insinuates the baseless claim that the event was conducted as preparation for the current coronavirus outbreak. Although Event 201 was a real operation, interesting that they call it an operation.
Yeah, that is weird.
It's like it's not. It wasn't a government.
Exercise
like,
is
yeah,
you know,
it was
what I would think. Yeah.
It was a real op. It was a real op.
Wow, this article has like done like you know, it has done the opposite of its intended goal by
it's bizarre. Yeah. It's like
it sounds like it was written by like a Quino or something. Like
although Event 201 was a real operation, there is no evidence that it was meant to model or engineer the current COVID-19 pandemic. It says Event 201 was a tabletop exercise that simulated a global pandemic, which resulted from a new coronavirus. So far so good. Very similar. The program was hosted in October by the John Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security in partnership with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and World Economic Forum. The invite-only event featured medical professionals, policy experts, and business analysts and future CIA directors, all focused on how different institutions would respond to the onset of a deadly virus. The fictional coronavirus, a coronavirus in general, being a specific kind of virus, in the scenario killed 65 million people over 18 months. Joint recommendations from participants urge international cooperation both in preparing for and handling a pandemic. The Center of Health Security has hosted 3 pandemic simulations prior to Event 201, going back to a 2001 simulation known as Dark Winter. So I guess it was. This is like, there were the 4 of these, and Event 201 is the most recent. The October simulation was the first time the center included private sector actors in its exercises in hopes of modeling how they might also react in such a crisis. The host responds to the prediction claim. Okay, so they made a statement, Johns Hopkins did. They said, quote, "To be clear, the Center for Health Security and Partners did not make a prediction during our tabletop exercise."
That's so annoying.
Yeah.
That's so ridiculous. Yeah, and... Well, I mean, it is fair, like, what they say subsequently, that they like, sorry, I'm reading the article now as you're reading it, but, like, they say, we are not now predicting that the COVID-19 outbreak will kill 65 million people, which, you know, is, that's, like, much fewer than have died worldwide of COVID at this point. But if you read a little bit further down the article, you know, they have a quote from Bill Gates where he says, like, in the past week, COVID-19 has started behaving a lot like the once-in-a-century pathogen we've been worried about. I hope it's not bad, but we should assume it will be until we know otherwise. Like, to say we should assume... Like, like, to say that, like, you know, when you're someone like Bill Gates, who I guess for whatever reason people invest such authority in these matters, like, that is, like, a borderline irresponsible statement in a way, or at least, I don't know if you... Even if you don't want to call it irresponsible, it's certainly, like... affects, like, the way that people perceive this, and thereby, like, affects its manifestation, because insofar as the real thing caused by molecules is also a social phenomenon, and when this guy who people trust says, like, we should assume that this is going to kill 65 million people, like, you know, until we know otherwise, which, like, we, you know...
Who, by the way, like, we talk, there's all this, like, you know, suspending Twitter accounts and, like, pulling news articles for being, like, disinformation or medical opinions from people who aren't credentialed experts. Bill Gates has 0 fucking background in medicine. He literally is, like, he's not a doctor. He doesn't have any, he didn't even study it in college. Like, he's a computer guy. He's a tech business person.
Yeah,
you know?
it's this weird, like, technocrat thing where, like, somehow his, like, you know, whiz kid status, like, he's just so smart because he's rich. Like, you know, so therefore that knowledge is transferred to everything. Like,
yeah,
you know,
because mommy got him a contract at IBM, which made his entire fucking career, he gets to decide what happens with, like, global health policy.
It's very odd, but yeah, like, anyway, like, to say that, like, it doesn't in some way, for one, like, I definitely understand how, like, the hectoring, I mean, I feel like we've talked about this a lot of the time on the podcast, like, the hectoring, like, tenor of a lot of these articles is very grating. I think that does, in many ways, contribute to, like, the sort of, dissimulation and disingenuousness you can see in this article, contributes to the health crisis, because when you read this, like, the effect is to, like, you know, the effect is almost indisputably to reinforce, like, anyone who has any suspicions. Like, it does not allay anyone's fears about this. Like, to say that this wasn't, like, a prediction, because that was the goal, was to predict and, in fact, prepare people for something that they believed would happen, and that Bill Gates later said, like, looked like what we were, you know, trying to model, and that we should assume it is like that until we know otherwise, and then to rate that as false. Like, no. Like, the point is to prepare people for, you know, of course, yeah, there's some certain exaggerations, like, as there always have been with this Dark Winter stuff, because the whole point is to be, like, kind of a scare tactic, like, you know, at least as a stated goal, and they've always extremely, you know, they're always sort of hyperbolized in certain ways, certain aspects of them are exaggerated, but, you know, to say that, like, it just doesn't hold up, like, it's not, like, to say that, like, our ruling is false, Like,
yeah, it literally says our ruling false in big bold letters, and then it shows their fact check sources, which are like all like it's just they're kind of like miscategorized. Yeah, like they're twisting it around and they're kind of judging it on like this extremely narrow band.
To say there is no
reason
to believe. There is no reason to believe that the current pandemic will resemble. Yeah, exactly. That's the narrow thing of like we didn't make a prediction. Like if they said like it had to get at a crystal ball and be like in 6 months there will be a corona. But like it still is a prediction that like eventually like this is it's not a prediction but it's an assumption that this is something that we need to be prepared for. It's even more than a prediction. It's like a basic presumption. But they said like. There is no reason to believe that the current pandemic will resemble the event 201 simulation, despite coincidences in the modeling and timing of the simulation. Okay, so this is like...
It's like shifting the goalposts, basically.
Well, for one, like, this is a huge, like, this all hinges on, like, some kind of difference between the idea of, like, resemblance and coincidence. Really, a resemblance is simply a coincidence in appearance. When two appearances coincide, then they resemble one another. Like, so like if there's a global pandemic involving a coronavirus, then that is a resemblance. And like, because those aspects of the simulation and our current reality coincide, they resemble one another. Like it, like
but that like, for some reason that can't be admitted in the like that's too far for a lot of these like fact checky type articles to go anymore.
And it has
simply say it's a coincidence and it doesn't have a deeper significance beyond that. It's just like but just acknowledging that it's an odd like for kind of interesting coincidence and like. If those things happen, but like they can't even give that much of an inch anymore. They have to completely kind of like focus like neurotically on the idea of like, well, it said it would kill 65 million people, you see, and this virus only has killed like 10 million people, so it's a completely different scenario. It's like you're missing the point. Like that's not the connection that people are kind of being drawn to here, that the numbers were the same or something, or that it was like like supposed to be this is about like training people for a crisis situation that is very similar to the one that ended up happening like a couple months later. And,
it really is like it really feels almost like that is published like actually like the stated goal of that is the like I if I were gonna make up my own conspiracy like right now it would be that the goal of that article is actually to promote like the the ideas that it's supposed to be debunking, because to me like for one even the like idea that they were they were disputing like that MAGA meme that was like or whatever, that I assume it's like a MAGA inflected type thing, but whatever, like that, that
it was like it was on some website about apocalyptic end times, like Christian stuff. So
but but what they said basically was like a pretty big coincidence if you believe in that type of thing. And like so that's what they ended up saying, like we believe in coincidences, and it was a big coincidence. So ultimately like what they're doing is agreeing with the thesis that if you believe in it, it's a big coincidence. But then there's of course the implication that like it can't be a coincidence. But I mean, really, if they wanted to, they should say like there's no evidence that like Bill Gates like caused this. I don't think that would have anything either. But what they did, but like what they did was like they went too far. They overshot it by a mile. Like, there's nothing, again, all that there is a coincidence, which to some people suggests certain things, but that's, like, the issue, like, to say that, like, this isn't a prediction, or something, like, like, to say that there, there's
it is true that they weren't trying to predict, but also nobody is alleging that they were, like, predicting it, like, that's not exactly what, like, the insinuation is that they were, like, predicting, like, that's just not... It makes your brain kind of hurt, and it makes me wonder if it is some kind of weird, sophisticated like reverse psychology psyop to turn people's brains to mush. Like if you either have to like just buy it and eat the lie and just or you enter this like place of like oppressive cognitive dissonance of like like I don't know, in the vein of what you said though about maybe it's like so bad that you wonder if it's deliberate. I found this BBC article that was more recent from November 22nd that is almost even more mind-bogglingly bad in terms of its debunking attempts, and it's from a segment, a little BBC. They have their own segment now called BBC Reality Check. So you can get all your good debunking articles in one place. It's called the Coronavirus Great Reset Theory and a False Vaccine Claim Debunked. So they say this is more about the Great Reset, and I think what they do here is kind of pretty wild. They say misinformation about a COVID-19 vaccine and pandemic conspiracy theories continue to thrive on social media. Here's what we've been fact-checking this week. Justin Trudeau and the Great Reset. We start with the revival of the baseless conspiracy theory known as the Great Reset. Okay, it's literally a fucking policy program, whatever. The revival of the baseless conspiracy theory known as the Great Reset, which claims a group of world leaders orchestrated the pandemic to take control of the global economy. The conspiracy theory has its origins in a genuine plan entitled the Great Reset, drawn up by the World Economic Forum, the organizers of an annual conference for high-profile figures from politics and business. The plan explores how countries might recover from the economic damage caused by the coronavirus pandemic. The WEF recovery plan has been interpreted as sinister, first by fringe conspiracy theory groups on social media, and then by prominent conservative commentators, prompting tens of thousands of interactions across Facebook and Twitter. It started trending globally on Twitter last week, when a video of Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau at a UN meeting saying the pandemic provided an opportunity for a, quote, reset, went viral. This sparked fresh claims from people within Canada and further afield that a cabal of global leaders is using the pandemic to introduce a range of damaging socialist and environmental policies. When asked about conspiracy theories at the end of the week, Mr. Trudeau said, I think we're in a time of anxiety where people are looking for reasons for things that are happening to them. We're seeing a lot of people fall prey to disinformation. A video from August, which now has close to 3 million views on YouTube, believes only Donald Trump can thwart this secret plot, which uses COVID-19 to bring the U.S. economy to its knees so the, quote, reset can begin, and people would be, quote, begging for vaccines. But the suggestion that politicians plan the virus or are using it to destroy capitalism is wholly without evidence. So too is the notion that the World Economic Forum has the authority to tell other countries what to do, or that it is coordinating a secret cabal of world leaders. And then it talks about a new French documentary called Hold Up, which is kind of being called the Retour sur un chaos, which is, I guess, the French plandemic movie, kind of, that promises to reveal, quote, the truth about COVID-19. Instead, it promotes a slew of previously debunked claims, including allegations that wearing masks is dangerous and global elites somehow planned the pandemic. And it, I guess, YouTube says people have called for YouTube to like ban it, but YouTube says the video does not violate its misinformation policies, although it says it has limited its spread in accordance with its rules on tackling content that could misinform users in harmful ways. Okay, so you can have like 95-hour ElsaGate videos like all over the place, but they throttle like the spread of videos that, okay, whatever. And I guess, there's something, they have a bunch of things on here, but I guess the main thing is like the Great Reset kind of, so I think what's interesting there is like the way that they're characterizing the World Economic Forum as just like the organizers of an annual conference for high profile figures from politics and business. And like, basically, I don't even think they're really alleging, I mean, besides the idea that, like, they did the pandemic on purpose.
Yeah,
but
well, that's the key thing, I think. Like, that's the, and that can, like, shitcoat, like, anything to do with this, like, at all. Which is the, like, thing, like, that, Bill Gates, like, launched it somehow, like he that. He did it. Which is, like... He did it. And that, and I almost feel like that really, like, poisons the well in some way, because like whether or not you believe that, like, I don't, like, I'm not really, well what I will say is that there is no denying that, like, you know, the way that these things manifest, the way that, like, science and diseases play out is as much a social phenomenon as it is, like, a material, you know, like a basic physical, chemical phenomenon. So, like, the way that the social dynamics are affecting how this, like, you know, happens. So, like, everything that has an effect on that, vis-a-vis, like, you know, regarding the virus, has an effect on, like, you know, the pandemic itself. Like, you know, it's not, like, immaterial. Like, that is as, like, tangible and as, you know, related directly to, like, this pandemic as anything. Like, the perception of it, the symbolism of it, like, that is all, like, highly relevant. So, like, you know, in dealing with this, like, that is, like, very much, you know, a thing. But and, you know, definitely, like, elites have a huge hand in shaping, like, the social response, the social manifestation, the social component of it. But, like, you know, the idea that you at least can never establish that provably, and probably, like, you know, there's definitely going to be a reaction of skepticism to it, especially when it's something as facile as, like, you know, Bill Gates is doing it because he's trying to make people take the mark of the beast, like, through the vaccine. Like, I feel like, you know, my personal
it's really
thing is,
easy to shitcoat.
Yeah, I feel like if Cotton Mather was, like, in favor of, like, inoculations, you know, then I am not sure that, like, the mark of the beast, like, you know, I don't think there's anything inherently mark of the beast, any more mark of the beast to vaccines than there is to, like, you know, RFID chips and stuff. I'm very much anti, like, cyborgification, any kind of microchip. But, like, again, like, there isn't really a microchip being implanted in you through the vaccine. If there were, that would be another thing. But, like, when people say that, then it's like, and someone's like, correction, like, there is no, like, you know, like, everything that Bill Gates says is true because he's not putting a microchip in you, or something like that. So, like, it becomes, like, this weird, it's a shitcode, basically. Where, like, you can be like, well, because there's no microchip, then, like, there's no reason to have any kind of, like, nuanced take on this.
Exactly. It just serves to, and actually, wouldn't you know that basically one of the takeaways from Event 201 that they ended up recommending was for governments to partner with social media companies and news organizations to censor content and control the flow of information. Their quote from the simulation is, media companies should commit to ensuring that authoritative messages are prioritized and that false messages are suppressed, including through the use of technology. Cool. But then you get this, like, this type of shit where it's like, there's nothing weird about the Great Reset. Stop being a weirdo and worrying about it. And, you know, it's all going to be great. I just want to see real quick, like, what actually the Great Reset is saying. Like, you know, oh, they have a microsite. Great. Oh, and a Great Reset podcast. He's got a Klaus Schwab has a cool podcast. Let's see. Oh he wants to. This is our best chance. He says we can emerge from this crisis a better world if we act quickly and jointly. Right, Schwab. The changes we have already seen in response to COVID-19 prove that a reset of our economic social foundations is possible. This is our best chance to instigate stakeholder capitalism, and here's how it can be achieved. Okay, right there, that pisses me off about the BBC and every other organization that is writing about this, where they only highlight the sort of wacky, not really accurate kind of conspiracy theories coming from right-wing people that think this is like a communist takeover of, like, the global economy, and that it's somehow not part of capitalism, that these are, like, you know, crypto, like, Maoists or something that want to, or Trotskyites or something that want to institute, like, a global communist one world government, when he says it outright that he says, you know, in short, we need a, quote, great reset of capitalism. So, like, and of course, if you're a kind of more conservative thinker on, like, economic issues, you would see that as, like, a Trojan horse phrase. Oh, you want to reset capitalism? Okay, commie. Like, of course. But, like, let's stop for a second and think. This guy is a West German, like, a fucking 70-something-year-old, like, West German rich guy who hobnobs with, like, European high finance and founded this World Economic Forum, which I can only imagine, if you kick that rock over, what kind of creepy crawlies are going to be, you know, in its history. And basically this guy is like a secret, like, Marxist. He's not even talking. I mean, like, it just seems like, no, like, it's just, like, very obvious that I think maybe, you know, you have to take him at his word to some extent. Like, and he's not going to get the biggest corporations in the world to go along with him if he's a secret communist, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's never going to happen.
Certainly,
you know?
That's not the case. Like, that this dude is, like, a secret communist at all. You know, and yeah, I mean, like, in theory, like, the idea of, like, a great reset, like, in a vague way, like, sounds fine, I guess. Like,
Sounds
I mean,
nice,
if it were
I
good.
guess.
Yeah, if it were good, if, like, all the bad things were, like, you know, gone and only good things, like, were left in place when we reset. But you know that's, like, not the case at all. Because, like, all the people who, like, control the current system are the ones who are orchestrating the reset. So that's why everyone's suspicious of it. That's why they think that they're going to use that to cement their control, not to, like, make it, you know, not to make things better for the people who suffer under the existing system, but to make it worse. Because, like, they are currently in control. Like, it's not a reset, like, you know, for anyone but for the, like, you know, it's orchestrated by the people who, like, are in a position to orchestrate a reset of capitalism, like, aka, like, the arch capitalists. So
yeah,
like,
this is the stakeholder. I mean, that's the real stakeholder capitalism. I mean, capitalism has always been stakeholder capitalism. It says he means it in, like, a bullshit way to be like, we're all gonna be stakeholders.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
No,
yeah.
like, there's the big stakeholders, and then there's, like, the little people. And he represents the former, absolutely. He also, I almost forgot that, because this also intersects with, like, very clearly with other things that have been brewing for the last couple of years, including the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which is also a kind of brainchild of Klaus Schwab that he started rolling out in 2016 and has had very firm interlocks with, like, the climate justice movement, I guess is what it calls itself nowadays, and, like, Greta Thunberg, everybody's favorite saint, everyone's favorite living saint. And, like, if you dig, I remember last year I was, like, digging, you know, kind of in peak, like, how dare you era, that I was, like, digging into the forces kind of behind that, in that, you know, new environmental push to, like, you know, we need to, like, stop, you know, climate change now, like, we can't wait, we have to, like, shut down, like, you know, whole sectors of, like, the economy and blah blah blah. And it's like, if you just scratch a little bit beneath the surface, it's all, like, billionaires and tech people and bankers and Gettys, literally, and people that made their family fortunes off oil. You know, like, the Rockefellers are involved, and it's like they've been cooking up this kind of NGO program for a little while, and so the Great Reset is really, in a way, it is like the implementation of the ideas that he laid out in, like, the Fourth Industrial Revolution idea, and it uses very similar language. You know, he says he wrote in 2016 that we stand on the brink of a technological revolution that will fundamentally alter the way we live, work, and relate to one another. In its scale, scope, and complexity, the transformation will be unlike anything humankind has experienced before. We do not yet know just how it will unfold, but one thing is clear. The response to it must be integrated and comprehensive, involving all stakeholders of the global polity, from the public and private sectors to academia and civil society. The first industrial revolution, I think we talked about the numbered industrial revolutions in a previous episode.
Yes, we did.
And shit. Yeah, so this is his answer, finally. The first industrial revolution used water and steam power to mechanize production. The second used electric power to create mass production. The third used electronics and information technology to automate production. Now, a fourth industrial revolution is building on the third. The digital revolution that has been occurring since the middle of the last century. It is characterized by a fusion of technologies that is blurring the lines between the physical, digital, and biological spheres. There are three reasons why today's transformations represent not merely a prolongation of the third industrial revolution, but rather the arrival of a fourth and distinct one: velocity, scope, and systems impact. The speed of current breakthroughs has no
sounds
historical
like FT
precedent.
Marinetti.
Yeah, wow. When compared with previous industrial revolutions, the fourth is evolving at an exponential rather than a linear pace. Moreover, it is disrupting almost every industry in every country, and the breadth and depth of those changes herald the transformation of entire systems of production, management, and governance. The possibilities of billions of people connected by mobile devices with unprecedented processing power, storage capacity, and access to knowledge are unlimited, and these possibilities will be multiplied by emerging technology breakthroughs in fields such as artificial intelligence, robotics, the Internet of Things, autonomous vehicles, 3D printing, nanotechnology, biotechnology, material science, energy storage, and quantum computing. Already, this is creepy, artificial intelligence is all around us, from self-driving cars and drones to virtual assistants and software that translate or invest. Impressive progress has been made in AI in recent years, driven by exponential increases in computing power and by the availability of vast amounts of data, from software used to discover new drugs to algorithms used to predict our cultural interests. Yikes. Digital fabrication technologies, meanwhile, are interacting with the biological world on a daily basis. Engineers, designers, and architects are combining computational design, additive manufacturing, materials engineering, and synthetic biology to pioneer a symbiosis between microorganisms, our bodies, the products we consume, and even the buildings we inhabit. Okay, well, here's his big pitch.
So basically, this is just like a way, the Great Reset is just a way to, it's not a reset at all, it's just like a way to, like, shill for the same stuff that, like, Davos and, like, the World Economic Forum have been promoting for a long time. Like, the same exact thing, like, you know, but they're just saying, like, oh, well, now's our chance to reset. But it's, again, just, like, a rephrasing of earlier stuff, like, you know, about how the world's changing, like, an interconnected, like, I'm just looking at the World Economic Forum right now about us, like, they say, our world is an economic system that straining under the burden of its own complexity. We see numerous factors combine to make the global environment more unpredictable and difficult to navigate. In global governance, we see the post-war balance between nation-states and the institutional framework that work to manage it disintegrating. In its place, we see the emergence of new geoeconomic competition, new regionalism, and new actors. Meanwhile, technological change is disrupting our economies and changing the nature of our globalized world in ways that are both unpredictable and complex. We will witness more technological change over the next decade than we have seen in the past 50 years. Advances in all the sciences, from robotics to genetics to communications and the social sciences, will leave no aspect of global society untouched. Around the world, the young generation is demanding to be heard, blah, blah. Like, these factors require a new kind of institution, one with the adaptability, the entrepreneurialism, and the trust of all stakeholders. That can bring together people who have the power to make change, to achieve mutual understanding and empathy, to come to common agreement, and, where appropriate, push action forward. As an international organization with no commercial interest, the Forum provides a platform for leaders from all stakeholder groups from around the world, business, government, and civil society to come together. So the whole thing, like, you know, it's a crisis. We need to, like, you know, step in and change everything. It's just like, you know, that's, like, what they've been saying for a long time. Like, and it's I mean, it's true. Like, the world does have kind of an emergent crisis where everything is in crisis constantly, and the history is, like, kind of one long unfolding crisis. But, you know, like, again, it's just like, yeah, like them shilling the same thing as always, but now, again, it's a window of opportunity for a great reset, to, like, do the things that they've always wished for. Yeah.
It's yeah, I mean, when you read about it, this does sound like, you know, he kind of, you know, he leaves it kind of open to interpretation, like, you know,
it's
maybe
extremely vague. It's extremely vague.
And he's like,
and
maybe this will reduce inequality, or maybe it will increase it, but I guess only time will tell, and I guess we just have to, like, try to, like, not, inaugurate a world of, like, new, like, horrible techno-feudalism or something.
Well, I mean, it's extremely meaningless, and it's just, like, like, listen to our partners, listen to our, listen to Klaus Schwab, and, we will, help, continue to empower us, and we'll, fix these problems, blah, blah, blah. It's just, a way to sustain the relevance, of these people. Which, I wanted to, read, some of this from a pretty influential book, in social sciences. Speaking of revolutions in the social sciences, it's not like a revolution at this point, because it's pretty dated. It's from the late 70s, 1979. A lot of people have built on this work by then, but it's by Elliot Friedson. It's called Illness as Social Deviance. And I was reading this because he was mentioned a lot in Barrett's article about Dark Winter in the spring of 1972, the Yugoslav smallpox outbreak. So he makes a lot of good points, very eloquently, I think, talking about the social component of illness, and I think that has some pertinence here. So he writes, and I think this is I think that you'll pick up on a lot of resonances with some of the stuff you've been bringing up. He says, in all cases, the idea of deviation from some standard is present. Human, and therefore social evaluation, what is normal, proper, or desirable, is as inherent in the notion of illness as it is in notions of morality. Quite unlike neutral scientific concepts like that of, quote, virus or, quote, molecule, then, the concept of illness is inherently evaluational. Medicine is a moral enterprise like law and religion, seeking to uncover and control things that it considers undesirable. But as I have already noted, medicine is kept apart from religion and law because, unlike them, it is believed to rest on an objective scientific foundation that eschews moral evaluation. Illness is thought to involve viruses and molecules, and thus to constitute a physical reality independent of time, space, and changeable moral evaluation. Thus, from the bones of men long dead, who spoke long-forgotten tongues and practiced now wholly obscure customs, we can independently of their culture draw evidence of fractures, arthritis, rickets, and the like. It is because it is believed to be independent of human culture, though human culture may influence its prevalence and treatment, that illness is felt to be different, more, quote, objective and stable than such clearly social forms of deviance as crime. In this view, illness is biological rather than social deviance, subject to the same biophysical law in man as in mouse, rabbit, or monkey, or bat. Whether we evaluate it or not, it is always there, independent of us. In the same sense, it is independent of medicine, hardly created by it. However, the view of illness as biological deviance is essentially abstract and programmatic. While we may subscribe to it as a measure of faith, we cannot rely upon it as our sole guide for analysis without wholly ignoring the interpretive character of social reality. Only among human animals is there language and meaning. He was leaving out dolphins, but we'll keep that aside. Anyway, he said, okay. In human society, naming something an illness has consequences independent of the biological state of the organism. He says, it may be argued that medicine is inappropriately placed in the same category as law and religion because law is man-made and therefore varies from one society to another, and religion is based on supernatural revelation, which is not amenable to the usual scientific methods of verification, whereas medicine addresses itself to an unchanging biological reality that is independent of man as the realities of physics and chemistry. The laws of medicine are therefore invariant, unlike those of law, and they are empirically verifiable, unlike those of religion. A broken leg is everywhere the same, and so can hardly be, quote, created by medicine in the same way that lawyers and legislators create law. Such an argument, however, fails to distinguish physical from social reality. I must insist that, just like law and religion, the profession of medicine uses normative criteria to pick out what is interested in, and that its work constitutes a social reality that is distinct from, and on occasion virtually independent of, physical reality. He goes on. The sociologist, there's a little bit more about the profession of doctors, which I think is good. The sociologist would naturally exclude from his domain any form of deviance which is believed to have a non-social, quote, cause. So it is that ordinary disease, which is thought to have biophysical causes, is excluded.
Such things as mental illness are included because socially influenced motivation is thought to be one prime element in the ideology. Indeed, most conventional sociological theories of deviance, the thrust of the analysis is to explain, in those theories, the thrust of the analysis is to explain how an individual or a group is motivated to perform a deviant act or take on a deviant attribute. The central explanation of etiology in traditional medicine is a physical event like exposure to a microorganism. The central explanation in the social and psychological sciences is some kind of motivation. Cancer is excluded not only because it is thought to have a physical cause, but also because, unlike mental illness, socially induced motivation is thought to play no important role in its etiology. Cancer is helped along, it is true, by such elements of social life as the custom that encourages people to inhale tobacco smoke, but it is certainly not caused by the symbolic qualities of social life as such. What is overlooked is that the way people respond toward disease is caused by the symbolic qualities of social life. And this is, some key doctor stuff here. He talks about the physician. As I have noted in a number of contexts, quote, the physician is at best a very general occupational type that can only be vaguely contrasted with the, quote, lawyer, the scientist, and the engineer. There are many kinds of physicians in the sense that systematic variations of some significance occur within the general profession. The content of the physician's work influences the kind of emergency he is likely to meet, and indeed whether or not his, quote, typical emergency will have the rhetorical force of a life and death matter to those he must persuade. I suggest that while all specialties, and indeed all kinds of work, have their typical emergencies, they vary in the degree to which the emergencies are generally believed by others to be critical enough to warrant suspension of everyday routine, and they vary in the degree to which such emergencies are frequent and characteristic, almost routine. In the specialty of public health, for example, the typical dramatic emergency is the outbreak of a lethal epidemic or of virulent food poisoning, a circumstance that would give the public health officer justification to breach ordinary lines of authority. However, in the United States, such outbreaks are so rare and so comparatively mild, he goes on, but of course that part's no longer relevant. But he says...
So now,
Yeah. The profession bases its claim for its position on the possession of a skill so esoteric, interesting, or complex that non-members of the profession can perform, cannot perform the work safely or satisfactorily and cannot even evaluate the work properly. On this basis, non-members are excluded from practice and evaluation. Given the exclusion and its implied basic concession of autonomy, I would argue that in spite of any formal administrative framework imposed by the profession, autonomy in controlling its technique allows it to temper many elements of that framework beyond both the intent and even recognition of its planners and chief executives. This is particularly the case for medicine, where dangerous consequences can follow upon improper work, and where the claim of emergency and of possible dangerous consequences is a potent protective device. And he goes on to, just talk about how physicians often claim there's an emergency when not all other physicians would necessarily agree. He just notes it is his ability to invoke life-threatening emergency and to claim exclusive capacity to evaluate it and solve it that marks the physician off from many other experts and other organizations. So
they have a special status like above the law in a way due to their caste, like where they basically can suspend, they can like implement like medical martial law, like I don't know, I just had this horrible vision of like I had this horrible vision of like Dr. Max Goodwin like leading like an Einsatzgruppen death squad, like hunting down people posting disinfo about Corona, like in the name of truth and fact, or something like. It's absolute worst manifestation, but like those white coats being a sign of like a Gestapo chief, like but really it's just they're on TikTok like psyoping people all day for the most part, and they can announce restrictions that politicians might not be able to get away with because they're
exactly. It's interesting how that guy observed, like, apropos to none of this, like in a situation where, like, to even mention, like, a pandemic was like, well, but that's not really something that comes up very often in the United States, it's interesting how, like, he lays out, like, the way that a medical emergency functions that's different from other states of emergency or states of exception, that can come about, and, like, you can trace that, I think, in the evolution of the conception of these things through, like, the Dark Winter. Like, if this had happened
you know, in like I don't know, maybe I'm just like spitballing here, but I feel like if this coronavirus thing had happened in 2001, I mean, it would be very different because I think that even things like being able to work from home like weren't fully in place then. You know, we were still in Web 2.1.0.
Well, yes,
things,
exactly.
You know,
that's so important. Yeah, like would there have been this reaction if we didn't have Zoom, everything, all that infrastructure ready to go?
But I also think that like we would have like, you know, invaded some country over it. You know, like I think that like there would have been like somehow this is like, I mean, yeah, exactly. It's hard to say, but like the paradigm like has changed in a way where I feel like, you know, maybe like, you know, maybe there would have been some like whatever the reality was, maybe the bare facts of the disease would have matched the Dark Winter scenario in the way that they now kind of seem to have, you know, despite what you would say today might say, some resemblance to the Event 201 scenario. Maybe like the social component would have been such that like, you know, I mean, we invaded Iraq over made-up WMDs, and, like, everyone at the time, like, you know, so, like, was expecting that there would be, like, you know, some Soviet scientists helping Iraqis, like, to develop, you know, an evil smallpox, you know, bioweapon or something. I have a suspicion that, like, if this had happened earlier, like, there would have been, like, some kind of war fought over it. But,
maybe.
Like,
it does make you also think of the anthrax thing in late 2001, which, like, there's pretty convincing evidence that it was some kind of bizarre inside job. The anthrax came from a U.S. bioweapons facility, and then, like, the scientist who allegedly did it, like, up and killed himself when suspicion turned to him. Very weird. Like, it was used to like pass the Patriot Act, and so you know, I mean, if we're talking about like deadly pathogens being like released shortly after a war game,
like, and it was like assumed to be like a bioweapon, and like was used for like this, you know, but now the whole
it had a fake terrorist thing. He wrote like "Death to Israel, Allah is great" or something on the envelope, and you know, it was like some white guy.
But now, like, the whole framework has shifted away from, like, that type of thing, where, like, Muslims are, you know, up to no good, like, are doing this, or, like, it's a terrorism thing, like that, and, like, in a way, like, it's a less effective method of social control than this, like, you know, we did see, civil liberties, especially in certain communities, we saw civil liberties, like, you know, really attacked under the auspices of fighting terrorism, but it's not as effective as a medical emergency where, you know...
that could apply to everybody, like, you know?
Yeah, and even, like, you know, in the Dark Winter scenario, as, like, you know, some people have pointed out, the focus of a lot of the participants and of the design of the exercise itself was, like, who's responsible and, like, you know, how do we deter this and, like, how do we punish them? But if there's no, like, you know, way to punish them, as, you know, that guy pointed out in the article that we read, or if, like, there's no one even to theoretically punish or deter, then the focus shifts to be on, like, the control of the population even more. So, you know, not to weave a whole pandemic thing, but I'm just saying, you know, it's intriguing. It's an intriguing progression. Because I do think that there is, like, there's definitely a social component, like, to this, where it's not just a matter of, I agree with Friedson's, like, analysis of, like, you know, the nature of illness in societies, where, like, there are aspects of it that are socially determined. I think that, like, the way this is played out is something that, you know, is very mumuch wedded to the circumstances in which it did play out, like the other factors, like, you know, the ones that we mentioned, Trump being president, etc., Zoom, blah, 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 like, you know, and even, like, the expectation of this by people in power.
Exactly.
Like, which, like, was, you know, a legitimate expectation that there would eventually be, like, a, you know, a novel coronavirus that would be, like, you know, scary and bad. But, like, yeah, that expectation definitely shaped the response to this. Like, Bill Gates's wargaming out of 65 million deaths has shaped the response to this, actual.
Yeah. Which he was shouting from the rooftops back in April that this is the once in a century, it's going to be so bad, and then now he's backtracked on it and said, well, I never predicted that specifically, you know, like, just so obnoxious. I think think we're coming up on 3 soon, but maybe just to like close out real quick, I just wanted to circle back to our buddy Klaus Schwab,
okay,
of whom like nothing about his family or young childhood being born in Nazi Germany exists on the internet. Just putting that out there. There's nothing about him before he founds the World Economic Forum in 1971 when he's already a professor. So there, he's just a good-hearted German engineer who just wanted to help European companies manage things better or whatever. So, I mean, I don't think we mentioned explicitly, but like basically, in case most people probably are aware of this, but like World Economic Forum hosts Davos every year. Like, so this is like the ultimate meeting of the kind of global super elites and the super capitalists. And I just wanted to like read through a couple of for anybody maybe that thinks, maybe Klaus Schwab is a secret, communist or something, just like a few of the guests and keynote speakers that he has had, as well as some of the people that he's recruited to run it, one of whom was Jose Maria Figueres, the former president of Costa Rica, who went to West Point and was the son of like a 3-time president in his own right, and I guess got kicked out he had to like resign in 2004 over some kind of accounting, like some kind of embezzlement-ish kind of scandal. Like he undeclared receipt of more than $900,000 in consultancy fees from the French telecommunications firm Alcatel, which is cool. In 2006, the WEF published an article in its Global Agenda magazine called Boycott Israel, but then they like apologized and said it was an unacceptable failure in the editorial process. They actually invited North Korea to Davos in 2016, but then, and North Korea, to their credit, has refused to attend Davos since 1998. And they almost did, but then they did nuclear tests, and so Davos revoked it. And this is kind of interesting. In 2018, for anybody who thinks that this is a radical left-wing guy here, in 2018, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi gave the plenary speech, becoming the first head of state from India to deliver the inaugural keynote. Modi highlighted global warming, terrorism, and protectionism as the 3 major global challenges. And guess who gave the keynote address in 2019? Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro gave the keynote address.
Wow.
On his first international trip to Davos, he emphasized liberal economic policies despite his populist agenda, and attempted to reassure the world that Brazil is a protector of the rainforest while utilizing its resources for food production and export. And I guess inviting Modi and Jair Bolsonaro
reassured, to be like the keynote speakers, like what? That's
extremely cool. And also just something I noticed earlier was that David Gergen, I think, serves on the board of like the World Economic Foundation, and remember he played the National Security Advisor in Dark Winter. So all these guys kind of I think Gergen is Skull and Bones because he went to Yale, so I haven't confirmed that, but yeah, I mean, if you look at like these people, all these people that are on the board of trustees, Mark Benioff, big NGO Salesforce guy, Al Gore, Yo-Yo Ma, Jack Ma, these amazing international elites that want sustainable stakeholder capitalism and are willing to work with like probably cocaine trafficking Central American presidents who went to West Point, and like people in Bohemian Grove, and let's see, I mean, even actually the 2020 Davos meeting, both George Soros and Donald Trump were there, and Greta Thunberg. So isn't it funny? Like Davos is where like the kind of the veils drop a little bit, and all these people just hang out, I guess, and eat pate, and plot. I guess they don't plot on how to run the world. That's a conspiracy theory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They talk about, how to implement strategies to harness global potentialities and reconfigure, networks. Create. They talk about how to contribute to a great impact.
They want a great impact. Also, it should be mentioned that like the co-author of the Great Reset is Prince Charles, speaking of conspiracy theories, his father, what's his name, Prince Philip, once said in an interview that if he believed in reincarnation, he should like to come back as a deadly virus that would wipe out a huge chunk of the world population to solve the overpopulation problem that he cared so deeply about. So that guy's son is going to do the Great Reset for us, and it's going to be great.
Prince Charles actually is supposed to be a secret Muslim, or that's like one, idea that's often floated, is that Prince Charles is actually a convert to Islam because he is I guess an admirer of Sufism, or someone who has showed interest in Islam in the past. So
he's probably, not to get your hopes up, he's probably doing an
reset. Maybe the Great Reset is going to be a caliphate.
I think I have to say, he's probably doing an insight role. He is probably a blood-drinking Satanist who is related to Dracula, so...
Right, yeah. I mean, but aren't all the Windsors... I mean, they claim to be Sayyids, they claim to be related to Muhammad.
I
Windsors.
don't know about
they're
Muhammad.
Probably related to everyone.
I mean, they're all...
Yeah, that's definitely something that I've heard floated, but, I mean, there's a lot of Sayyids out there, that's interesting that he wrote the Great Reset, but, he's one of the original secret Muslims, even before Obama, I think.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. He just wants sustainable economic growth. And you know what? I mean, he presumably is going to be the king any year now. At least for a little while.
Wow,
or maybe
really?
he won't.
I didn't know that.
I don't know. Maybe I don't follow the royal intrigue. I'm not like an American simp like that. I don't.
Yeah,
I don't track their little palace intrigues. I haven't watched The Crown, so I have no idea.
I was just
really.
saying, I wonder, what do you think is more pathetic, Americans who simp for the UK, or people from the UK who simp for America? I think that actually Americans who simp for the UK is probably worse because, they're already kind of our vassal state, so it's natural that would inculcate some simpery and admiration and kind of desire and subservience to America, but to do the other way around, I feel like is really perverse. I don't know, but it really is hard to say. It's really hard to say.
They're both pretty cringe, but
yeah.
Okay. Well,
all right. Yeah.
I guess it's stay warm out there.
It's a dark winter.
Take some vitamin D. We're in it, and there's gonna be it's gonna be a great reset. It's gonna be great.
It's gonna be a beautiful reset. Yeah, it's certainly not the beautiful continuation that we were promised. Instead, we're in for a reset. Yeah,
we're hitting that big Hillary Clinton reset button.
Yes.
Not stakeholder capitalism to have a great future of stakeholder capitalism.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. This episode will probably actually be heard or be released significantly after this, as we said, very portentous astrological event that's happening tomorrow night of the solstice plus grand conjunction. Very, very rare, probably something that hasn't happened for centuries, I would think. That those two things have coincided. So yeah, watch out. Hopefully this will be released, and tomorrow a bunch of giants won't emerge.
Or Phaetonians coming from their underground layer.
Or a blue beam situation. Yeah.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, I mean, the blue beam will be especially bright in the dark winter.
Yes. That blue DNC, like DNC blue, like it's gonna be build back blue. Build back better blue.
Yeah, but take your vitamin D, try to, cut people some slack for being insane around the pandemic because, everyone's going through it. It's a nightmare,
it's wearing on everybody and might be like the largest PSYOP campaign in human history. So, let's be compassionate to one another. Let's be generous. It's quite
let's all come during this Yule tide. Let's all come together and hold hands, from MAGA pandemic people to, stay the fuck inside, hectoring school marms.
People that still have Warren stickers on their car.
Oh god. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All of us. We can just huddle together.
Yes, exactly. Abu Dor, I'm just picturing a bunch of MAGA people and fucking Warren people, yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah, although I guess that wouldn't be socially distanced, so that's already something. See, we can't even do this. Yeah,
What?
Anyway,
do what you gotta do. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
Whatever, but just and then we'll get a little rest and we'll figure out what to do about the Great Reset on the other side of this very interesting year.
Yeah.
So
that's true.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Happy holidays. I don't want to say happy solstice to any Satanists out there, but if you're celebrating it in a white magic way, I guess.
Happy holidays. I guess. Happy. Right. All those other holiday. All those kuffar holidays that people are celebrating.
Sure.
I guess it's Shabi Yalda. The Persians sometimes, celebrate.
Okay. Right.
Yalda night.
That's cool.
Yalda.
Okay.
I don't really observe myself, but yeah. Although I get, I get, Persians of all varieties too.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well,
there's a Chela around this time, 40-day period of retreat and fasting. If you're doing that, then you're probably not listening, but yeah. All right.
All right, so we'll see y'all on the other side of probably on 2020. Or not. But have a not super dark New Year, and until next time, dear listeners, stay vigilant.
Peace.
Today is the shadow of tomorrow. Today is the present future of yesterday. Yesterday is the shadow of today. The darkness of the past is yesterday. And the light of the past is yesterday. The days of yesterday are all numbered in some. And the word once, because once upon a time there was a yesterday. Yesterday belongs to the dead, because the dead belongs to the past. The past is yesterday. Today is a preview of tomorrow, but for me, only from a better and happier point of view. My point of view is the thought of a better and try reality. Yesterday is eternity. The eternity of yesterday is dead. Yesterday is as one. The eternity of one is the eternity of the past. The past is once upon a time. Once upon a time is past. The past is yesterday. Day. The past is yesterday. Day. While we're searching for tomorrow.
The music is different here. The vibrations are different. Not like Planet Rave. Planet Rave's sound of guns, anger, frustration. There was no one to talk to but Planet Rave, you understand. We set up a colony here.
light of the past is a light which was. The wisdom of the past is a light of the past. The light of the future was a light which is to be. The wisdom of the future was the light of the future, see. Yesterday belongs to the dead, tomorrow belongs to the living. The past is certified as a finished product. Anything which is ended is finished. That which is perfect is finished. The perfect man is no exception to the rule. The perfect man of the past is made according to the rule of the past. The rule of the past is a law of injustice and hypocrisy. The revelation of the meaning of the law is revealed through the law itself. The wisdom of the past is the light of the past. The light which is to be. The wisdom of the future. The light of the future casts the shadows of tomorrow.
Effective vibrations. For the better, of course.
Sun Ra. Sun Ra.
Lord Quas.
Mad Lib.
Another place in the universe, up under different stars. That would be where the ultra-dust